Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ed-Conference 2021 by Saathi Global Education Network. My name is Jennifer George, and I will be your host this evening. I would like to begin by thanking all our attendees for the incredible turnout we received in yesterday's panel discussion and workshop sessions. Today is the final day of this two-day event, where we aim to bring together worldwide experts and leaders from the education sector to discuss transformations in school collaborations post-pandemic. The focus of Ed-Conference 2021 is on global teaching and learning, covering a wide array of opportunities that have recently opened up in the education sector. But before we start today's spirited evening with our panel discussion, I would like to introduce Saathi Global Education Network's CEO, Mr. Kartik Sarda. Mr. Sarda has been a part of the education sector since college. He started by helping international students in reading and writing in English. After working with students from more than 40 nationalities, he later moved to tutoring mathematics and physics in college. Soon after, he made a career in professional tutoring and mentoring as he helped hundreds of American high school students on a one-on-one level with their academics. In 2019, he realized the urgent need for these students to learn more about the problems that were affecting our civilization at an early age and become global problem solvers with respect and empathy for diverse cultures. This isn't a goal that can be achieved by a single human or even by a single institution. This goal can only be achieved by joining hands and leading our future generations towards a sustainable way of life. And there is no better place than school to carry this vision. Thus, Mr. Sarda and his team at Saathi Global Education Network started working with schools in order to facilitate international collaborations and skill building programs for their students. He's extremely passionate about this project, so I will end my piece here and let him enlighten us further. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Kartik Sarda, the founder and CEO of Saathi Global Education Network.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that amazing introduction. And thank you everyone for joining us here today, especially those who attended yesterday's panel discussion and workshops as well. So welcome you all once again. Before we begin with our panel discussion today, I have a couple announcements to make. The first one is a big one. Yesterday was an amazing day for us at Saathi Global Education Network. And after looking at the kind of response towards global collaboration, we have decided to extend the pre-registration period by another 10 days. So all the schools here, this is especially for you. In short, you can now register your school with us till 25th of July and still get a free annual membership. So, and also please start inviting your network as well for this extended pre-registration period. The other thing is you can earn a super school badge for your school by inviting 10 or more people to attend the event today from your organization. So this is a rare achievement that we will highlight on your school logo on the platform to make your school stand out. So please start inviting other people to join as well. And lastly, before we proceed, I actually want to share a video that we created to describe Saathi Global Education Network and what it actually is all about. So allow me to present my screen and let me know what your thoughts are. 1 second. Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Great.
Schools are like second homes to our children, and teachers, they're second parents. Every day you create a difference, nurturing young minds, carving a bright future for them, and building a supportive community. But with all these responsibilities and the hard work, don't you deserve some support too? With Saathi Global Education Network, you become part of a worldwide community. A community of teachers, just like you. Where you matter, where you can connect collaborate, and cultivate. Become a part of something big, yet recognized for who you are.
So that was just an introduction to Saathi Global Education Network. And yeah, I mean, without further delay, let's actually begin our session today. First of all, a big welcome to all the panelists here today. Thank you so much for joining. And it's amazing to have you all here. I'm actually going to be hosting today's event. Unfortunately, we had Mr. Naman Pant who was going to join us today, but he's facing some emergency, so he wasn't able to join. But anyways, let's begin with the introductions. Our first panelist for today is Ms. Nancy Weinstein. She's the CEO of Mindprint Learning. Prior to Mindprint, Nancy worked at Bristol Myers Squibb, the Walt Disney Company, and Goldman Sachs. She has a BSc in bioengineering from University of Pennsylvania and an MBA from Harvard. She's the co-author of The Empowered Student and is an international speaker on using science of learning best practices to improve student outcomes. Nancy, thank you so much for joining us today. How's the morning weather there in the States?
It's great. I'm glad to be here, but I will be drinking my coffee.
Yeah.
If you'll all excuse me while we're talking.
Definitely. Awesome. All right. Our next panelist is Ms. Surabhi Goyal, the CEO of Aditya Birla World Academy, the Aditya Birla Integrated School, and Aditya Birla Education Academy. All ventures of, you guessed it, the Aditya Birla Education Trust. A qualified chartered accountant, she brings with her 18 years of experience across finance, project management, operations, budgeting, branding, and marketing. She has worked at large multinational organizations such as Arthur Andersen and ICICI Bank. Her life mantra is learn, unlearn, and relearn. Words to stand by for sure. Ms. Goyal, welcome to the panel. How are you doing this fine evening?
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Karthik, and I'm delighted to be here and meet with all my fellow panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Mr. Sid Balega, the Group Marketing Head for Excellencia Infinitum and Essentia Schools, 7 Excellencia Junior Colleges, and Teach Tigers, which is an edtech startup. Prior to working with Excellencia, he headed marketing at the Orchid International School. Mr. Balega has hosted senior leaders from NASCOM, Toyota, GMR, L&T, Deloitte, Microsoft, Tata Communications, and many such bigwigs to engage them in intellectually stimulating debates on topics of interest to the industry, academic fraternity, and student community. Mr. Balega, we are thankful for your presence today. Any words for our audience?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karthik. I'm happy to be here with you all today.
Awesome. Thank you. Next, I want to welcome Mr. Sahil Kapoor, who is a seasoned edtech professional for K-12 B2B and B2C models. He has served multi-million-dollar enterprises and has been instrumental in setting up new initiatives. An ex-business head of eBix, Smart Class, Vice President of Educom Solutions, and Sales Director and Regional Manager of Tata Class Edge, he's a seasoned edtech professional who comes with multi-dimensional experience in successful management. Mr. Kapoor, so glad to have you with us today. Do you want to say hello to everyone?
Hi, everyone. Pleasure is all mine. And I'm delighted to be a part of this panel.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Kapoor. Our next guest is Mr. Shantanu Rooj, a serial entrepreneur who started his career with HCL. As a first-generation entrepreneur, he founded Paradigm, which is now called Glowdyne, followed by Broadline and School Guru. A passionate education entrepreneur, columnist, investor, and speaker, Mr. Rooj currently heads Teamlease EdTech, one of India's finest leading EdTech companies. He has been featured in many reputed national and international magazines and newspapers. Mr. Rooj, thanks for joining us today. Would you like to add a few words for our audience?
Really excited to join this panel with you, Karthik, and all the other panelists. Look forward to the discussion today.
Yeah, same here, Mr. Rooj. Looking forward to it. All right. Our next, I would like to introduce Ms. Praveena Tapa, who has been an education entrepreneur for over 15 years of with over 15 years of experience, specializing in general education and special education from the USA and the UK. She's the co-author, co-founder, and academic director at Premier International IB World School, which is the first IB PYP and IB MYP school in Nepal. Under her leadership, Premier World School was also the first school in Nepal to introduce virtual classes and the use of a virtual learning platform since 2015. Glad to have you with us, Ms. Tapa. Do you want to say hello to everyone?
Thank you very much. Hello and namaste, everyone. I hope you're all keeping well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tapa. Our next panelist is Ms. Alpana Bhaveja, a passionate educator with almost 2 decades of experience working with various schools. Her rich exposure to CPSE, Cambridge, as well as ICSE curricula has shaped her distinct and innovative approach as an academic leader. A recipient of the prestigious Times Achievers of Education Award and Education Excellence Most Innovative Principals Award, she has extensively conducted a number of seminars, workshops, and teacher training capsules in India and abroad. Ms. Alpana, we welcome you. Would you like to add something before we begin with our panel discussion today?
Yeah, thank you so much, Karthik, and a good evening to everyone out there. And delighted and excited to be part of the panel.
Yes, definitely. Awesome. So glad to have you all here. And does anyone want to add something before we begin with the panel discussion? Anything?
I think I would just like to break the thing by saying I loved the video when you said that schools are the second home to children.
Yes.
And I think we all as educators strongly believe that. So
definitely. Definitely. And it's a common saying, right? So I think a lot of people definitely do believe that. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So without further delay, let's begin our panel discussion. And I would like to start this session by addressing something that a lot of students and parents have been talking about recently. Online classrooms have robbed students of the social and physical aspect that is very important to our civilization, and also put students in their comfort zones, rising concerns for fragility. Many students have actually complained about mental health issues during the pandemic and problems with focusing on the learning material due to spending so much time on screen. So what are your thoughts on how we can improve this situation, especially with many edtech companies now focusing on techniques like gamification in the classroom from a social collaboration point of view? Ms. Weinstein, I would like to begin with you. What are your thoughts on this?
So thank you, and appreciate being on the panel with everyone today. I think that we always have to step back and think about students' purpose. I think that the number one thing that has come to light during the pandemic is that we're still doing school the way we've always done school. It really just hasn't changed very much over the last 100 years or so. And if we don't give students their intrinsic motivation of why they want to learn, all the gamification in the world, all the fun stuff that will last for a while. That will help. What we call the extrinsic motivators, right? Like giving students small rewards. But ultimately, when we want students to learn, find their passion, want to go deeper, we need to take the time to find their intrinsic motivations. They will be different for each student. But technology actually gives us the opportunity to find those different intrinsic motivators for different students and then support them in doing that. And so to me, it's not so much a technology issue. It's I'll always come back to the learning sciences, but it's how the brain works, how we're motivated, and building from there.
Awesome. Yeah, that is absolutely correct. I think that motivation part on the students' end is definitely something we should be looking at other than just the technological aspect. Ms. Tapa, do you want to go next?
Sure, I absolutely agree with Ms. Weinstein. I think the problem is not with screen. Yes, it is more apparent to us now because our children are having to have more screen time and study, in a very unnatural manner, which has made the problem that much more apparent to us. But The problem actually lies in the way that we look at education, the way that we approach education. Even before the pandemic, even prior to the pandemic, when we were teaching in person, the issue of mental health was still there. We were failing to see an individual as an individual and, cater to the whole child. And we were just working on the brains. We were only working on math, science, English, and social studies. There was that disconnect even in the classroom, even when children were able to hold each other, even when children were able to hug each other, they had to wait until they could go for recess, until they could go for lunch to actually, have that, time to connect with your friends, genuinely connect with your friends and genuinely connect with each other and learn the way that social people learn, the way that human beings learn. We learn through interacting with each other. We learn through, through crying, through laughing, through arguments, and through collaborations. And even back when things were not on screen, these problems still persisted. We just never saw it as a big problem. We weren't alarmed by it because it was natural to us. And it was something that we had been doing since centuries, since ages, since years. But as educators across the world, we had started to question our ways. We started to question that, what we're doing is not how human beings are supposed to learn, how they're supposed to grow, and it's not appropriate, and we need to change the way we look at education. So yes, as Ms. Weinstein said, we could gamify things, we could try and make things interesting, but the underlying problem will still remain, and it will only be a temporary solution and not a problem, not a permanent solution. So if we really want to address this issue, we really have to look at how we look at education itself in the first place and address there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I really like the fact that you pointed out that with the online learning and with this change in the way we address education, it's actually pointing out some of the mistakes that maybe we were overlooking before. So I think that's a really good point for sure. Next, Mr. Kapoor, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I actually feel the world has changed after year 2020, March. Mr. Modi one day came, and I'm talking about India, and said, now schools will be closed for 20 days, and that 20 days went to 90 days. Until date, we have not been able to open the schools. And world is divided into two types of schools, click school and a brick school. So the recent scenario is click school, and the brick school was the school where we used to go. And like you very rightly said, screen time has increased, and that is taking a toll on kids. But that could be managed. That could be managed with a lot of gamified activities. Self-paced learning needs to be there. There need to be comprehensive reports for kids. Like you could understand, yeah, this kid is a slow learner, this kid is a sharp learner, this kid is an average learner, and this activity could be conducted. So that way around, you'll save on time. And if we go back to era of Gurukul, there were no visuals available or no smart classes available, but a lot of kinesthetic activities were there. Learning by doing activities. This is where academicians can come in and they can make a change. If you want to teach directions to kids, rather than showing them a video or teaching it, take them outside. Tell them right shoulder towards the rising sun is east, and this will be west, this will be north, and this will be south. So involve them into activities rather than making them sit, because everybody has gardens in their houses, or obviously in societies, there are places. You can go out and you can teach kids, but parents, they have to support academicians in this. So it will go hand in hand.
Definitely, I completely agree. I think the parents will also have to support support the schools, who, by the way, I think have adjusted very nicely to all of this, and they definitely deserve tremendous support from all the parents as well during this time. Ms. Goyal, do you want to go next?
Sure, Karthik. While I think I 100% agree with what both Praveena and Nancy said, and I also like to bring a different perspective to this. I'm sure all of you have heard of the Stockholm Syndrome. When hostage develops like a psychological connect with his captor, and this develops over days, weeks, and months. I think to an extent, this is what is happening with the children during the pandemic. Our children, especially the ones who have access to online schools and who have not gone to a physical school for a really long time, I find sometimes they now think that this is a better way of life. We could just study out of home. And really, how unfortunate is that? Because the purpose of education is not just academic achievement, right? But more importantly, it is the social interaction, the character and mindset building that we need to do. And not even the best online school in the world and the best gamification company in the world can address this aspect of crucial learning. So let's accept one reality, that we really need to have our children go back to school, as soon as it is safe for them to do so. At the same time, let's understand that a large majority of children, especially in India, have not been able to have access to any sort of education in the last 16 months. It's literally been like a gap here. And I don't think we even fully understand the long-term effect of this learning gap on human capital, not just on the children, but on the country as a whole. So I think, to answer your question as to how we can improve the situation, I would just say train the trainers. Whether it's like a Balwari or Anganwadi teacher, a Marathi teacher in Raigarh, or even an English teacher in an elite South Mumbai school. It's imperative that the trainers are trained to learn, unlearn, and relearn, to use the hybrid model of learning. They have to be taught how to sort of blend in the edtech tools and enhance their learning experience. That is where I think the solution lies. And also to quickly just touch upon the mental health aspect that you mentioned, I think that's extremely important. Yes, it has compounded. And I know that, say at our organization, we've actually hired therapists. We have access to therapists, not only for our students, but even for our teachers, for our staff, for parents. We've really worked on our outreach program. We have trained our teachers in something called mental health first aid, which is to be able to identify signs, of children struggling online, because, when you don't see them physically, it's sometimes difficult to catch those, little situations. So just training, I think, will help sort of really, embrace all the opportunities as well as the challenges that we're facing currently. Thank you.
Definitely. And I think even the government is helping our teachers with this initiative, right? I think at least the government of India is, I think, helping us out with that for sure. And, when you were mentioning this, it reminded me of the dialogue in Three Idiots, Chabuk ke dar se to sher bhi baithna seekh jata, something like that, right? Like, I think students deserve that opportunity to do socialize. Education is not just about, having knowledge, but also other skill sets that come with school and with physical schools, for sure. Completely agree with that. Thank you so much, Ms. Girl. Ms. Bhaveja, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So as rightly pointed out by most of the panelists out here, that, this sudden paradigm shift of online classes, they have definitely brought a lot of challenges for our students, parents, and educators. Even parents are not very happy with this online system, because a lot of parents in my school keep telling me it seems as if we are running the school in the house, right? So definitely it has been a challenging thing. But tell me one thing, what is the option now? I think screens are the only options today for connecting children to the outside world, right? So we cannot deny this fact. And what is more important is not the screen time or the quantum of screen time, but I feel what is more important right now is exactly what our children are doing, So as parents, as educators, we need to monitor what exactly they are doing. And I'm sure all the panelists out here will agree with me that people having a higher EQ are more likely to succeed in life. And therefore, an emphasis on social and emotional learning and physical activities is definitely a requirement. But if you see, in our school, when we moved to this online classes, we started with yoga classes, we started with dance classes, we did a lot of things. But the question was participation. Were we having 100% participation? Were the children showing in 100% and were they actually benefiting out of this? So I think as educators, we have really tried to figure out a lot of ways wherein we, see that we are trying to give whatever best we are able to give our children. But as researchers say, that only 10% educators are, being able to fit in this, to address the social and emotional learning. And as the other panelists were also saying, I also agree that this has increased because, my counselors, online sessions we have with these children, and they're actually feeling something is amiss. If you see, I have a teenager daughter, and most of the time she herself has mood swings. So though she's getting the best of everything, all these online resources, everything, but a teacher, school, it is very, very important. But yes, we cannot say that will not be progressing and will not be developing. We will surely be doing that. A lot of children are into home chair parties. They're watching movies together, thereby discussing on the same issues, maybe a common movie, and they are developing on the skill sets. But again, as I said before also, that we cannot deny the importance of schools and the teachers. So I think collaboration, as one of the panelists also said, we as educators and tech companies need to collaborate. And I think together we can make a difference.
For sure. Definitely. That last line I think is 100% true for sure. Yeah. Awesome. So next, Mr. Rouge, what are your thoughts on this?
Hey, Karthik, thanks so much. One thing is for sure that a computer is no match for a classroom for kids to learn. But what happened is that the COVID-19 actually induced the largest remote learning experiments in history in the world today, right? As soon as this health crisis struck all of us, in the face of a scientific uncertainty, because there's nobody knew where's the solution, nobody knew what's the treatment, nobody knew when the vaccines are coming up. The only choice left for policymakers at that point in time was to close down schools. But the students really paid a very heavy price for this, right? We have started seeing the type of fatigue which is catching up, the isolation, the disengagement, all of this is really factually happening all around us. Just some time back, about a couple of weeks back at Team Tech, we conducted a survey of close to about 700 odd educators across the country to figure out the learning loss among students because of this sudden movement from a physical to a digital format of education, right? And we realized that there are three important reasons that you can attribute all of these things to. One is the digital divide in this country, right? A large number of students do not have access to computers or internet connectivity or a smartphone. So those are the people who have been hit the maximum. The kids in the lower grades are the people who have hit the maximum. Look at the type of delayed government response to all of these stuff. So that's something that has led to some of these learning losses. But one of the most important stuff, which is the third one, is the pre-existing disease in the education system here. When the sudden movement happened from a physical to digital system, most schools and colleges and universities across the world actually moved to a semblance of maintaining some sort of education continuity. And we started replicating whatever we did in a physical classroom in a digital classroom. The problem was about pedagogy. You can't just start doing whatever you did in a physical classroom or digital classroom and expect students to remain engaged, right? Even in a lot of reputed big schools, and my daughter goes to one of the very reputed international schools here in Mumbai, and I've seen that this exactly did what they did in the physical classrooms. Start at 8 a.m. and they have got slots and teachers coming and doing the lecturing. That doesn't work. I mean, somebody has to possibly figure out that the online format of education is very different from a physical format of education. But I do not blame the teachers or the education system because this movement was just sudden. The problem was that the education world never gave much importance to education technology prior to COVID, right? In India, the problem is that we don't change for a better option. We change only when we have no option. So this movement, sudden movement, led to a lot of these problems. And I think only way to solve this problem is to bring the kids back to the classrooms. A lot of countries have started working on that aspect. Asia is stabilizing. You've started seeing countries like Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, Japan, China. Students have already started coming back to the classroom, right? In Europe, you start seeing countries like France and Spain and UK where students are coming in. North America is partially started opening up. Latin America, Africa, there's still some challenge, but I think that the only way to solve this problem is to bring the kids back to the classrooms.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Mr. Rouge, for that. I completely agree with you. And hopefully, like things are looking much better, fingers crossed for the third wave, but yeah, definitely. Lastly, Mr. Balaga, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks, Karthik. So I think education means different things to different people. So for a student who is doing undergraduation or post-graduation, I think he's comfortable learning online. He just wants to acquire knowledge and perhaps get a job after acquiring that skill. So for him, he really doesn't want to go out and socialize and so on. So for him, the degree matters and maybe the job post that degree matters. But for a child who is in, let's say, grade 4 or grade 5, how does he learn? He learns by experiencing the real world. So whatever content, you might have the best of content online, but pushing it down his throat doesn't make sense. He has to go out, he has to socialize with others, and that's the way he's going to learn. You can't create more and more content. It might be of the best quality, but he doesn't want that. He wants to go out and learn through peers, learn by seeing the real world outside. So to put it very crudely, the solution to the problem is not to create more online stuff and try to get them engaged. Open up the schools, find solutions to get them back to the physical classroom. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Mr. Balaga, for that. Yeah, I think it has definitely, been a challenge with this format. And yeah, thank you so much for your insights there. My next question is a little tricky and just a fair warning. EdTech companies have grown a lot, but there still isn't a single company out there that has its operations spread across the world. There are many EdTech companies serving local needs depending on the systems of education followed by the respective countries. But with online learning and increased globalization among the education sector in the last few years, is it becoming easier or harder for them to expand their operations offshore to more markets and that do not follow the same system of education as their own country? Mr. Balaga, what are your thoughts on that?
I would say we are actually looking at the problem from the Ivory Castle. We have 65% of the rural students, studying in government schools, which do not have access to infrastructure, they do not have access to quality devices. They do not have access to devices. Forget quality devices, and internet connectivity is a challenge. Outside urban areas and semi-urban areas, and especially the creamy layer in urban areas, people have a challenge accessing the content. Now, the quality and the affordability is the secondary factor. So the affordability is also another challenge to access such content. We have got large edtech companies, but providing very expensive content. So making it affordable, making the infrastructure available to people across the remotest of corners of India, I think that is more important. And then we will be able to see edtech making inroads into the remotest corners. So that's what I say.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Balaga. We actually have a similar question for that in terms of the affordability of technology with the content. So I'm sure that this point would be definitely valid for.
I think it's a clear case of haves versus have-nots,
yeah.
At least in the Indian context. So if we are able to solve that problem, we will be able to make inroads.
For sure, for sure. Mr. Kapoor, what are your thoughts on this expansion of services and operations for edtech companies?
I would say nothing comes easy. It's easy said than done. By the end of this year, Indian edtech market would be around $2 billion. So, and they are predicting $30 billion by year 2030. So potential is huge. There's a lot of meat. But as Sid said, infrastructure, affordability, these are the challenges. These are the challenges for our system. And the challenges for edtech companies, they need to work on modern subjects. What is the real life application of what they are teaching? It needs to be taught in the subject. Innovation will be the key. Like we were talking about time management. Do we have a solution for time management? Do we have something of that kind? So we need to think that way around. And that's only done, like I have spoken to more than my research with my research team, more than 1,000 principals in last 7 months. And we have done a lot of R&D. My Russian team gets involved in. We do a lot of R&D and then we jot down the things and then we see there are a lot of coding solutions in the market, and it's not against anybody. And we claim your kid will be an app developer, or he'll create websites after doing this course. And actually, it only happens with 4 or 5 kids in a million. So it's not fact. We need to build kids for the future. We talk a lot about 21st century skills. So what are 21st century skills? So we need to build kids on the leadership skills, their stress management skills, time management skills, social thinking. So I think potential is immense, but road will be very tough, and innovation will be the key.
Yeah, and I think those factors are actually the factors that do unite all the kids across the world with each other, right? Like irrespective of the education systems or irrespective of whatever time zones they're in, like one thing that is for sure uniting them is all the things that you just mentioned at the end, for sure. Thank you so much, Mr. Kapoor, for that. Ms. Weinstein, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think it's important to sort of step back. So in the U.S., and I don't know the Indian market as well, so y'all forgive me, but it's so localized. So every district you go into, every elementary school thinks that they're different and unique. And I think there's an enormous opportunity to say what is universal. Some things might be domestic, some things might be global and universal. And how can we really do the best of breed to provide what can be global and universal to everyone when we figure out what works? And it was almost like a missed opportunity, I would say, in the last year, because every school was trying to do the exact same thing, right? So every third grade was trying to teach, let's say, long division, right? And we have Khan Academy for that, right? So that can be the universal piece of it. And then so we could, in theory, create the universal structure of what really is truly universal, and then build on that what needs to be customized, right? So everything needs to be customized in your native language, but it also needs to be customized based on purpose, culture, and motivation. And if the system could in some way come together to sort of embrace what is universal, and we can say, someone's done a great job getting this done and explaining long division in a way that most kids understand it, every third grade math teacher doesn't need to figure out how to reteach that, because that's a rubric. But every third grade teacher, based on their local system, based on their communication, their interaction with their students, could make it worthwhile and motivate that student to want to learn. And when they're not getting it customized for them, so it meets them where they are. So to me, that's the dream. And yet people get in the way of technology in that particular case, because again, we come back to somehow when we get into the schools, they think that, you learn long division a different way, and we don't. So to me, there's a dream there, and I think that we can move more in that direction, but we need more people to embrace the model.
Thank you, Ms. Weinstein. And this is actually so interesting. So during yesterday's panel discussion, we had one question to all the panelists about centralization of education around the world. And all 7 of our panelists disagreed that a centralized system is not going to work with anyone, because everyone has their own learning styles. But also the point that you bring in, that if we are able to crack this code of a universal way of teaching certain concepts that do agree with the majority of the people, I think that is in some way definitely more possible now, because of the kind of data we are gathering, right, with online education, with the immense amount of documentation that we're doing in the education sector. I think that can definitely lead us into that particular direction, for sure. Mr. Rooj, what are your thoughts on this?
Hey, Karthik. Dumbledore told Harry Potter in Chambers of Secrets, saying that it's our choices more than our abilities that reveal who we are. The important element or important art of strategy is to choose the most appropriate ones from the scores of equally lucrative options, right? if you look at Indian edtech companies today, I think that COVID-19 brought forward edtech by at least 10 years. So whatever would have happened in 2013 started happening in 2020. But if you look at the genre of Indian edtech company, I think we have the finest qualities available in this country today. We have the fine companies preparing the finest of the platforms, the most intelligent platforms, the huge, the ability to personalize learning, the ability to generate high quality content. Byju's today is one of the most valuable startups in the world today in the world of edtech. I think it's just a matter of time. Indian companies are just prioritizing the local market, and they're fine-tuning their solutions, fine-tuning their strategies and their products. Very soon you'll start seeing many companies, including ours, have started looking at international markets and started showing up our results there. And very soon you'll start seeing Indian edtech companies showcasing similar success the way IT companies in India have showcased. So you'll start seeing Indian edtech companies becoming global companies very soon.
I'm so glad to hear that, because we also are kind of a startup, right? We are a startup at Saathi Global Education Network. So those words are definitely very encouraging for me, for sure. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to move on to our third question. Keeping a lot of initiatives of government in mind, of Government of India in mind, by the way. So technology is not cheap. And we already had a sort of a discussion about this in one of the previous questions. Every day, the content needs to be updated to keep it exciting. Many people are involved in creating this content, writers, animators, narrators, expert educators, and we need to pay these guys, right? How can we optimize our costs so as to reach even the remotest parts of the world and provide them with quality educational content? Ms. Thapa, what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you. I would like to address this from two different perspectives. One is going back to the initial thought that I shared in the first round. It's the way that we approach education. Generally, the way that we've always approached education is we have certain textbooks to follow, to teach, and education is done, and we're done teaching. And but then, the reality is that there is so much to learn just from your environment, just from your surroundings, and just from exploring what you have, in your community itself. And if teachers are trained to be resourceful, if teachers are trained to harness that inner scientist that each and every child has in them, you don't need any other resources. So, having or not having textbooks or resources online should never stop a child from learning if the teachers are trained well. So that is the first thing I would say, we need to look at and address. And everything else, a good quality textbook or good quality resources, good quality, online resources is an addition. So that's how I think it should be seen. Now, when it comes to reaching to to even the people who perhaps might not have access to information, might not have access to electricity, might not have access to good high-speed internet, let alone expensive resources online. I think when we're thinking of that larger scale, the government has to step in. That's where I think the role of the government becomes very imperative. I think the government can play a role in bringing together institutions who have the capacity to make it happen. And instead of each one of us working on our own, maybe the government can play a role to bring us all together, put all our resources together and collaborate to work on something that might be of value, not just for one institution at a time, but for the entire nation as a whole. So I think, those two ways of looking into things might help create a long-term solution. Thank you.
In this aspect, again, going back to the point about data, I think government has the data to reach out to these remotest parts of the country, and not just in India or I'm talking about all the countries in the world, right? They are usually the one who care about this market the most. I shouldn't call it market, but the audience the most, right? So yeah, I think I completely agree with you, Ms. Tapa, on this point. Ms. Goyal, what are your thoughts on this?
I believe technology players already have an advantage over a traditional school setup, right? I mean, schools have to invest such a large amount of money in large infrastructure, like say, for example, the CBSE has mandated a 2-acre land requirement when you want to set up a school. Also, schools end up employing such a large number of people, right? Whether it's support staff or housekeeping staff, etc. So in that sense, it's already, edtech companies or edtech players already have an advantage. I mean, we know that Twitter was started, I think for the longest time, they had only 13 employees. Also, I believe that it's not necessary that learning becomes cheaper when there is technology. For example, White Hat Junior offers courses which are more expensive than the entire year fees of some of the very good ICSE schools in the country. So it's not really necessary that it's making it cheaper. I think it's only offering a lot more flexibility, which is great, right? At the same time, you may have a Udemy, which offers courses at 500 rupees, or a Coursera, which gives you access to a professor in Oxford, which otherwise I wouldn't have. So I don't really work for an edtech company, but I would think that how does one make, operational efficiency? It would be the same answer, right? Economies of scale, which means just reaching out to more and more people by digitizing India, which is what my fellow panelist already mentioned, making the product more relevant for the end users. Say smart boards were a big thing earlier, but I don't think they are as flexible and as relevant anymore. I don't know, perhaps relook at the marketing costs, not sponsor the Indian cricket team. I'm just saying that in jest. Getting people to work out of home a little bit more. So just relook at your cost. Trying to grow too quickly, too fast. Sometimes you're not really probably being efficient with your cost. So yeah, that's what I can say as an outsider. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gould. I think some very, very solid points brought up by you that I think a lot of people can keep in mind moving forward in this revolution of EdTech. Yeah, so does anyone else want to add something to this? Ms. Bhaveja, what about you?
Yeah, so Karthik, I feel whenever any new technology is to be developed, so to address the needs, there are few prerequisites. So to name like enabling infrastructure, a viable business model, and there has to be a target audience, right? So if we analyze the ecosystem in our country, especially, so the reach of these edtech companies is confined mostly to the urban parts of the country, and therein also to the privileged sections of the society. A lot of people I know, maybe are maids or those brackets, they were just sitting in the house because they didn't have those smartphones. So a majority of the population in the country, including maximum kids in rural areas, as well as majority of underprivileged kids of the urban India, still do not have the access to these edtech tools. So practically a very small segment is being targeted presently. So lack of enabling infrastructure in terms of good, reliable internet connectivity, as my fellow participants also pointed out, smartphones, desktops, laptops, this has to be there. So what? So if you see, the Niti Aayog had released a discussion paper in 2018, wherein they were emphasizing the use of potential of AI in multifarious fields. And if you see, this could be a priority in education as well, which was again pointed out. And NEP 2020, I'm sure all the educators and everyone has read, it is released last year, and it brought in a big boost to the use of technology in education, besides promoting learning about technology right from the primary school. So when NEP also calls for investment in digital infrastructure, development of online teaching platforms, virtual labs, repositories. So definitely, as rightly pointed out, the government has to pitch in, right? And what I could think of is that we again need to collaborate. Now, if you see, if you collaborate with the schools, all these edtech companies, if you collaborate with the schools, we already have educators, we have the curriculum, we have the infrastructure. So I definitely feel the revenues will come down, right? And again, if you like to collaborate with NGOs for the rural areas, because they have the resources there, and again, you may have a cost-effective solution. I also think, I really don't know if it would be viable or not, but if you collaborate again with the mobile and telecom companies, because they have their own content and they can be sharing on their own platform. So while education is a priority area for the government also now, but we understand that government have their own, shortcomings. So I think the scope is at looking various government departments, state government, to provide funds, subsidies to these edtech companies. and so that it could reach to the masses. Because as an educationist, we all want that it should reach to the masses, because there are a lot of children out there who are blessed, but they don't get the right opportunities. So while multiple options exist, I'm sure that the edtech companies would be looking at it and they will think it better. Again, educators and technology developers, we have to collaborate and address the right needs and develop the tools so that we can be cost effective. Thank
That
you.
is true. And again, this actually goes very well into the next question that I was actually going to ask about collaboration between edtech companies and schools. But before we go to that, Mr. Kapoor and Mr. Rouge, do you have anything to add to this? From an edtech point of view, since you are specifically working in that industry.
So if you look at Karthik, the pandemics like this do not create new trends. They just accelerate pre-existing trends, right? So the world of education hadn't changed as fast as the world of work. So educations, there are various reasons why people go for education. One is definitely to create better citizens and better individuals, but also to ensure that people are being able to create a living for themselves, right? So the world of education hadn't changed the way the world of work had changed. The future definitely belongs to us as a situation where there will be multiple life forms of education. And you'll start seeing something where there will be physical schools, there will be digital schools, there will be combination schools, there are vocational schools, there are skilling schools, you'll start seeing multiple life forms. So we really believe that we need to wake up to the fact that the world is changing a lot faster than what we can fathom, and we need to change as fast together to keep up the pace.
Definitely. Mr. Kapoor?
Yeah, I personally believe, like Surabhi Goyal also said, affordability is a concern. And we as a company, we come in here, we are well aided. We are working on a freemium model. We are giving complete access to teachers. We are not even charging a single penny for our content, which could be reached out and given to students. And even students get certain activities daily free. And like Surabhi said about coding, people are ready to spend 1 lakh rupees on coding, but they won't spend 5,000 rupees for the same product, because Hrithik Roshan or Amir Khan is not advertising this product. So for that, I have to go out, my people have to go out and create awareness. So affordability is also there. There are companies. They are there to accommodate kids. They are there. We are looking forward to collaborate with schools. We are looking forward to give affordable solutions.
Definitely makes sense. And since you mentioned the celebrities, Mr. Balaga, you come from a heavy marketing background. How do you want to add to that?
Karthik, your original question was more like a chicken and egg problem, So how do you reach? How do you penetrate?
Yeah.
And how do you optimize the costs? So
Yep.
for optimizing the cost, as somebody said, economies of scale. So economies of scale have to be built, and for that penetration is required into the markets. And for penetration into the markets, the first challenge, at least in the Indian context, is about, as I said earlier, infrastructure and affordability again. Infrastructure and access to quality devices, affordable devices. So if this problem is solved, the reach part can be taken care of to some extent. And if that is taken care of, your the second problem of optimization of costs is automatically taken care of then.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, to me, it seems like the government has to play a huge role in all of these things, because again, like if you're talking about reach, government probably has the best reach out there in this whole segment, right? Like, am I correct?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Awesome. So thank you so much for contributing in that question. My last question for all of you, and fair warning, this might be a little controversial, is that e-learning companies have grown a lot in recent times, and some parents around the world have completely shifted towards these companies for educating their child. This has affected schools a lot, especially the ones that couldn't adapt quickly to new technologies. Post-pandemic, what do you think about the growth of schools, as many of these companies will now coexist, especially with the growth in the edtech sector now, and also in some cases compete with the schools? So we are just talking about collaboration, in the previous question. So is collaboration the way to go for mutual growth of e-learning as well as the schooling industry? Or do you think this is going to severely affect the schools with the growth of the content and private e-learning companies coming into place. Ms. Weinstein, what are your thoughts on this?
So I think that there is certainly best of breed, right? And there are things that, as other panelists have mentioned, there are things that are better done online and can provide scale. And there are things that really should be done in person. Similarly, there are, what we know about the learning sciences is there are certain students who absolutely thrived working in an online environment for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes they were just advanced and could work at their own pace. Some students with weaker attention who not having to be in a structured environment actually helped them. And I think those students should be in an online environment. And then there are the vast majority of students who actually belong in bricks and mortar, in a classroom and working with a teacher. And so I think that I think we don't know where things will shake out in terms of the percent. There will definitely be more students learning online going forward than there were historically. In the US, a disproportionate number of students that learned online were doing so for religious reasons or because they were athletes. And I think that that mix will also change. I think what we learned, and actually what businesses have learned, is what doesn't work is having some students in the room face-to-face and some students hybrid. That's been the least successful. And I think that we need to be, as an industry, very careful about not allowing that to happen, because that's not a solution in general. It's shown not to work. And so we have, we have learned that from the pandemic. So I don't think we have a big problem. There is no single right answer. I think it's complicated. I think we will move more toward online. I think we should for certain reasons and certain circumstances for some students. But certainly the majority of students should still be in person, in the classroom, getting the benefits, and hopefully we've learned enough that we can improve the traditional classrooms, that they learn something from this pandemic so they don't go back to business as usual.
Yeah, and regarding hybrid schools, I think that was one of the bigger things recently in the United States, right? Because I was seeing a lot of my students going to these hybrid schools, half of them were doing online and it was their choice. Like, is that correct? Like the US, I think, was adapting to that very, right?
I think they were trying to, I think there was a lot of need for choice, where you can't require students to show up in person, at least during a pandemic. And so they had to give both options. But what businesses found, there's a lot of research out of Harvard Business School, as well as in schools just more anecdotally, because they didn't have the opportunity to do real random controlled trials. But I think what they've really discovered is having a classroom where you have a teacher in front of the classroom trying to speak to students who are online and students that are there in person, and trying to manage that dynamic just doesn't work. It almost doesn't work for any students, and it particularly does not work for the students who are online. Now, if we have a student who, for health reasons or whatever, has circumstances where they need to be online, I think we've learned that that can be a substitute than just not going to school. But it should not be the sort of accepted standard solution. It should certainly be on an exception basis, and that some classes can be taught online, right? And frankly, for better or for worse, the math classes, if we're teaching formulas and rubrics, that can be taught more easily. I'm not saying it should be, but it can be taught more easily online, and then go out into breakout groups when students don't understand. But there are other topics that are just better in pure collaboration in person. That said, so there are topics this is why learning is complex. There are topics that are better in person versus online. And then there are students that are more apt to learn in person or online, right? And trying to bring that all together. The problem is who is making that decision when we're talking about K to 12 is the parent making that decision for the child. And the parent is actually not the most knowledgeable about what is best for that particular student. They have some knowledge, but alone just by themselves, they have the knowledge about personal choice and preferences. They might not have the best knowledge about how that student learns best because they might not be a trained educator. And so that's a challenge when parents are making those decisions based without a full data set on which they're making their decision.
That is true. That is absolutely true. Thank you, Ms. Weinstein. Mr. Root, what are your thoughts on this competitiveness versus the collaboration aspect of EdTech and schools?
So as I was telling you, Karthik, that the way we see it, we think that the future belongs to a time where there will be multiple life forms of education. If you step back, take a step back and realize that problems in education has been there for a very long time, right? Different people define education differently. I love the way W.B. Yeats actually described education as lighting up a fire, not filling up a bucket, right? So in a world where Google knows everything, I think in education, our measuring matrix has to shift from inputs to outputs and outcomes. Most schools measure themselves in terms of inputs, in terms of teachers' salaries, their qualifications, the buildings, the technology-enabled classrooms. All of these are inputs to education, right? We have to measure ourselves to outcomes and outputs. We have to realize that differentiation is not about making things easy for the learner, but it's our ability to tap into the motivations of the learner to ensure that learning starts happening inside classrooms. We have to realize that assessment needs to shift from a term-end examination to something like a continuous feedback, right? We have to realize that teachers knowing the content is not same as they being able to affect learning inside classrooms. We have to realize that timetables are a industrial era zone where there was a one-size-fits-all type of situation, right? Today, the world needs personalization. Every child learns differently, and we have to realize that education is an organic learning process. If we realize all of these together, we will realize that formal education is definitely not going to be a necessary condition for anybody to become successful in life, right? And if you need proof, just look at the previous president of the United States, right? So people will definitely need education, but then everybody doesn't need to go through a 15 years of continuous education. At least do not need at one single go. The future belongs to an education system which is always on the go, online, on site, on job, modular, multimodal, crowdsourced, and gamified. We see a system like that. We see an education system where both academics and skilling goes hand in hand together. People will need to choose. People will need to choose combinations of all of these together. So we see that schools will need to evolve. Change is inevitable. I mean, the dinosaurs did not die because the world changed. They died because they refused to change, right? So schools have to realize that the world needs them to change, and they need to evolve to something which is more meaningful, something which is outcome driven and output driven. And I'm sure that there will be multiple life forms of education. EdTech companies will survive, schools will survive, colleges and universities survive, but we'll see a different avatar of school. We'll see a different avatar of this universities. That's what I think.
That was such a powerful statement. Definitely. Thank you so much, Mr. Rooj, for adding this. And yeah, I completely agree. I think the focus has to be on the outputs. And I think we're just realizing that now with the pandemic, because a lot of times we are sort of ignoring the outcomes and focusing more, especially in India. I cannot say much about the other countries, but I think in India, we are focusing too much on the way, like we conduct exams and all of those things. But now we are focusing a lot more on some of the other issues that are being brought up. And even parents, right? I think parents are also concerned a lot more about outputs now than before. Like previously they were like, yeah, okay, my student has a homework or this or that, but like now they're actually looking into the outputs that their students are getting out of these online educations, for sure. Thank you so much, Mr. Rooj. Ms. Tapa, do you want to add to that?
Sure. Well, I think, the question is not technology versus human. Technology is never going to be able to replace human. Raising a child, teaching a child, especially from K through 12, I would say, is a nurturing process. It's not a manufacturing process. If it were a manufacturing process, then maybe technology would be able to replace a teacher. But because it's a nurturing process, it requires a human being. It requires a human touch. It requires somebody to understand, when a child is low, to understand when a child is struggling, to understand when a child is happy, to be able to laugh together, to be able to cry together, to be able to counsel the child, to be able to just be there, and sometimes to be able to not go by the books and change things and sway things and be flexible. And only a human being can give that touch. Technology can never, ever replace a human being. Having said that, technology is a tool, and it's getting better and better every day. It's getting more and more intelligent every day. It's becoming more and more user-friendly every day. So those educators, those schools will survive in the future who have the capacity to use those tools to its optimum. And only those parents are going to opt for only technology led or technology replaced by teacher being replaced by technology, if you feel that the child is not being understood as an individual. And it's not a matter of technology. It happens anything and everything. As teachers, we are supposed to, that's the human touch that we bring. That is the speciality that we bring as human beings and as teachers. And if we are unable to do that, parents will and might south for, deschooling, which has happened even prior to the pandemic, right? We have deschooling movement. We have homeschooling with parents who prefer to homeschool because they believe that the school is not, helping raise that individual the way we are supposed to. So I think the problem is much more deep-rooted, and it's not about technology versus humans. It's about how well can we apply this tool that is available for us, and it is rapidly changing and developing.
Thank you, Ms. Tapa. That makes sense. That makes complete sense. All right. So, Mr. Kapoor, do you want to add to that?
Absolutely. I completely agree with panelists. Whatever content, whatever tech companies create, these all are teaching aids. They cannot replace teachers. Teaching is a profession which teaches every profession. And if we go back to year 2008, when all this smart class and everything started, we all were consumers. We were just buying out smart class, half-cooked smart class solutions, I would say, and we were using it. Then as teachers, as academicians, we started contributing to it. We started creating worksheets and adding it. And then PPTs and GIFs came in the third C. That was they started creating some content. And now we are in the fourth C, which is collaboration. We need to collaborate. And for that, all edtech companies, the companies who want to evolve, they need to come up with affordable, open-ended solutions, which are customized. Teacher can anytime switch back to curriculum and then come back to the solution. So there's no difference at all. And teacher has the liberty of adding and deleting content. Because the experience teacher has, there will be teachers like I have personally visited more than 7,000 schools in last 11 years. So I would say there are principals and teachers, they have experience more than my age. So what they can bring on table, we can't. So that is where a lot of R&D would come in, a lot of research would come in, and open-ended and customized solutions are the vehicles.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kapoor. I think that makes sense completely. I think experience is one thing that no matter how good we are with technology, it's it's going to be very, very hard to replace that for sure. No matter how much data we have, or no matter how good of a civilization we become in the future. Ms. Gill, what are your thoughts on this?
So while I completely agree with whatever said, right? It's not even a question about technology versus teacher, etc. I like to sort of, in fact, ask more questions and really give answers here. As Shantanu mentioned, there's a massive disruption that is due in the education sector, right? So it's happened with, say, entertainment and sports, where the winner takes it all, right? We only want to watch Amitabh Bachchan's movie, or we only want to listen to Arijit Singh. We want the best. Maybe that starts happening with teachers and facilitators. Only the best teachers and facilitators survive. When you have access to, the best, why do you want to go to the second best? Having said that, I don't see that happening anytime soon in schools, because schools remain a highly regulated space. The government keeps a very tight leash on the working of schools. Jobs have to be protected. And it's natural that some sort of mediocrity does creep in, but that's how it is. On the other hand, I think edtech companies have an advantage, right? They're barely regulated, yet we don't really see, or at least I don't see a Google in the edtech space. And I think the players are focusing on being service providers, or to say, draw an analogy like a reseller on Amazon. They're not Amazon themselves. This is because they're offering content which supplements the existing boards, right? They're trying to fit into a module of, oh, we are offering CBSE gamification app, so we are offering an ICSE gamification app, or whatever it is. They don't have the freedom to suggest that this is what should be taught in grade 5 in, say, math. Or recommend that why doesn't your child start studying global perspective as a subject? Because everybody just wants to stick to the sort of syllabus, right? So they're just kind of supplementing what schools are really doing. So I think just kind of creating a global presence is very difficult. But yes, I think EdTech and schools need to collaborate. And I like to just kind of end by addressing the elephant in the room. There is a notion among teachers, okay? I know that while we may say that it doesn't exist, but there is a notion among teachers that technology will replace them. And this is actually detrimental to the implementation of technology in the classroom. So the teachers have to be reassured that technology is a friend, it is a tool, and all of this will, again, as I come back to say, will happen with training and the power of data literacy. So yeah, that's it from me.
Thank you so much, Ms. Goel. And I think we have a lot of teachers listening to us today. So hopefully, that statement would definitely reassure them regarding this. Also, I was thinking that your point of view is, again, from a large country's point of view, is that also applicable to smaller countries where people are very quickly, people can very quickly switch education systems or the way they want to learn, especially in developed countries, because in large countries, changing the way people think is going to be a lot more difficult, right? But for smaller countries, do you think that would still be true, or do you think they would face even more problems?
I don't think it's the size of the country that matters. If you were to go to Bangladesh or to Sri Lanka, and perhaps Praveena can answer this for Nepal, but education remains regulated. And therefore, it's very difficult for that integration and collaboration to happen, because the teachers automatically start feeling threatened, and the government is not going to do anything to make them feel uncomfortable. And therefore, they may not actually allow collaboration with edtech companies, which actually perhaps is the need of the hour, would remove mediocrity, will make them more answerable, will definitely improve the quality of the education. It also calls out on their inadequacy of being able to provide the digital tools. So why will the government want to, sort of promote this? And it has nothing to do with the size of the country, I would think.
Okay, great. Awesome. Ms. Praveena, do you want to add something to that?
I absolutely agree with that. And it takes a lot to change the nation. It takes a lot to change each and every individual teacher. And it takes a lot of resources on the part of the government as well. And as human beings, I think it's only natural for us to want to stick with what works and resist change. And one of the things that I'm scared about is that post-pandemic, teachers are going to go back to doing exactly what they were doing prior to the pandemic. They're going to go back, take out their 8 textbooks, 7 textbooks, and teach exactly the way they taught prior to the pandemic. And I hope and I pray that that doesn't happen and we change with time, because it's inevitable and it has to happen, and it's healthy that we change with time, and we'll be doing justice to children as well. But it is very difficult. In case of Nepal, I don't think teachers are scared about the fact that they would ever be replaced by technology. They're just hoping for when is this going to get over and we can go back to doing whatever we used to do prior to the pandemic. That's where, private schools like ours come into play, where we set a certain standard, we set a certain model, and we show and we share what we've learned with other schools as well, and set the bar a bit higher and lobby as well, the government at government level, and set the bar as a whole, because as educators, it's not enough for me to just teach my 500 or 600 students, right? The whole nation can only be uplifted if the entire nation's education system is uplifted. And I am, I am trying to lobby and then, take this forward. But sadly, the reality is that people are just waiting to go back and do whatever they were doing prior to.
Yeah, makes sense. Ms. Bhaveja, what about your thoughts on this?
So Karthik, I also go with Ms. Thapa and Ms. Goel, because I think from heart we are all educationalists, and teachers can never be irreplaceable. Let's be very clear on that, because as Ms. Thapa also rightly pointed out, we school and teachers, it is a nurturing process, right? Now we also, I'm sure we all remember the best of our teachers who inspired us, because technology is not going to inspire children. Technology is not going to motivate children. Technology definitely will make the classes more interesting, right? So if you see Baiju on and all also, I mean, I have a child who is in grade 10, and all right, it is there. She can clarify her doubts, but she again looks forward to her teachers to, explain it further. Even Baiju has a set of teachers who explain the concept and who follow up. Yes, change is inevitable, as Mr. Ruth rightly said, but it is important. But then we have to see, we were talking about blended and hybrid curriculum in US. If you see in our school also, parents, they, when the government said you can open the schools for 9 to 12, parents were not ready to send the children, and we had sent a Google form wherein, we started with a hybrid model. So 40-50% of the students were coming, where the parents were working. And again, 50% of the children, they were starting from the house. So, we had to manage a hybrid system, which was even more difficult, planning the timetable and everything for the teachers. And as we all know, there are robots in a few schools, but robots are only to assist the teacher. The teacher is not being taken out from the classroom, right? So I think, yes, EdTech companies are going to do a good job. Today, you won't believe that I think all the schools, we are conducting parent-teacher meetings online. We are also having different groups where we are giving activities to children. Teams app has this different rooms, and children are doing that. But the teacher is there to monitor, if children start chatting. Now, what all parents send us, see, we enable the chat option and children are chatting amongst their friends. So there has to be a teacher who has to monitor this. So I think, yes, there would be priorities. Might be in a few years from now, there would be homeschooling and such stuff in India also. But then a school and a teacher is irreplaceable, because nobody else can, inspire and motivate like a teacher. So I might be biased in my answer, but this is what I feel.
No, I think most of the panel agrees with you anyway. So even if you're biased, I think you might be on the right side. Mr. Bhaveja, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, sure. So Karthik, regarding your point whether physical schools can coexist with EdTech, so let me look at this in a slightly different way. When we talk about K-12 schooling, I would rather break it down into two parts. One is the core schooling, and we have got a test prep business, a very lucrative part of Indian education. So test prep comprises of various exams and competitive exams that students prepare for. Let's take IIT JEE, for example. So where children start preparing ever since they start going to kindergarten, and they start preparing for these competitive exams in India. Now, moving this online is pretty simple. People may adapt quickly, and provided obviously affordability and accessibility is there, and shifting online is possible. We've also seen the Akash Baiju acquisition happening of late. So all that is possible. Definitely adaptation could also be quick. But when it comes to core schooling, direct moving to online could be a challenge, primarily because obviously the regulatory things are there in place. That is one part. And second part, homeschooling still has a social stigma. So if homeschooling is socially acceptable in India, we might see a lot of movement of children trying to study online at home and giving off exams through open schooling mechanism. So that social stigma, I think, is a important hurdle, which if we overcome that, I think we'll see quick adaptation to online learning for core schooling.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bhaveja. I think those are some very unique and excellent points brought to the table. Before we actually go to the Q&A session, there is one question being asked in respect to this particular question by Trishna. Quite clear that teachers can't be replaced, but how can we influence and bring a change if we don't have a direct contribution in the policies and the regulated education system? So very interesting question. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
So I sort of disagree, even when it was something as very simple as should the schools be reopened for exams in Maharashtra. The education minister herself, conducted a meeting with some of us, and we were invited to offer our suggestions and, give our input. So it's not entirely true that the government does not necessarily give importance to what people are thinking about. And like I mentioned very early on, incorporating any change or change in mindset will come with training only. So we just have to keep training teachers and also emphasize with the government that they need to invest in training of educators. And being able to have a constructive, collaborative dialogue with the government is always possible. So I sort of slightly disagree with that.
Yeah. Ms. Weinstein, do you have any addition to that from an American point of view in terms of the government collaborating with the schools?
It's complicated. I mean, literally we don't even have really national collaboration. We have state and local collaboration. And so every state is different. During the pandemic, the federal government, for the most part, the federal education department decided to step back and really not provide much guidance. And then every state was providing different levels of guidance. It was a mess. It was a mess, and it put the burden on schools. I think there is a role for state and federal support so that, again, we can, I think there's a model in other places where in other industries where you can have some amount of universal supports and universal regulations, which enables you to do local customization, which provides the level of scale that we need. But there's not universal acceptance that that's what we should be doing. But you could certainly envision a model. I mean, they tried to do it in the US with Common Core standards, where they tried to have sort of universal guidelines and then allow for local customization. And the Common Core is almost gone in the United States. So I think that no smaller countries have been able to do that. But you start having countries that are diverse, like the United States and India, and larger populations, and people think that, education has to be local, and that's why we do lose a level of the scale, and we spend a lot of time trying to test to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, as opposed to spending the time on resources that can be used for all and then customization. So
makes sense. Yeah. Mr. Rooj, do you want to add to that?
So Karthik, I think everybody has more or less summarized whatever the important points. Teachers definitely are irreplaceable. But it's important to realize that the future of education is very different from what we saw. I think that from an education perspective, COVID-19 is not just a passing shower, it's climate change. It is changing the world forever. I mean, teachers definitely, Ms. Tapa talked about that. Once they go back to the classroom, there will be a tendency to go back to what they did. But I'm sure you'll start seeing a different momentum from parents and students who are used to seeing a lot of flexibility, a lot of content, all of these things they have experienced. So there's going to be something. So all service providers, be it schools, be it colleges, universities, edtech companies, I think they'll need to think harder about the purpose and deliver on their commitments. That's going to be important. It is ensure that we create meritocratic cultures with a fear of falling and a hope of rising. I think we'll have to think about how do we balance cost, quality, and scale. Only those who understand these changes and make necessary amendments will stay relevant. Rest of all, in my opinion, will become case studies in history.
Another very powerful statement, Mr. Rooch. Thank you so much for that. Ms. Weinstein, I think you have something to add. Yeah.
We spent most of the time talking about K-12, and I think that's the audience here. I think it's worth stating that there is more change happening in higher education, and they're being forced to change in ways because students are paying for their education and demanding more and demanding that flexibility. And I do think that in my opinion, it's really hard. It's going to be hard for K-12 to sort of change in any kind of revolutionary way. Yeah, there will be evolutionary change, but the system's not necessarily built for that. And I have actually a hard time envisioning how schools look very much in general. Most schools look very different 2 years from now than they did 2 years ago, K-12. That said, I think that you do see changes happening in higher ed, and I think you can envision a world where those changes actually get pushed down, right? I think those things are happening. There's schools closing, higher education schools closing in the US. It's forcing even the top institutions to change. And when they change, then I think you'll see it flow down. And I think so. I think where you see in the US, VCs investing their money, they're investing their money in higher ed and workforce because that's where the change is happening more immediately, with the expectation we all hope that it gets pushed out. So I think it's just worth looking at that.
Definitely. I think that's also true for India as well, to some extent, in my opinion, because and there was actually another question related to this, that so in India, the government allowed an all pass for all 12th grade students, and Shashi wants to know what are your opinions on that. And I think going to the higher education's influence on K-12 and parents keeping in mind that they want, like they're looking at the long term for their students in this respect, I think that point is very, very relevant for sure. So, but anyways, moving to the next question that Shashi asked, what are your thoughts on the all pass decision of the government for 12th grade students? Ms. Bhaveja, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, thank you, Karthik, for the question. So, seeing the current pandemic situation, there was no option left, right? If you see, definitely for especially students who have really worked hard, and for them it was total backup situation because they are not very happy with the decision. Because India may especially, boards, since the child is in grade 5th or 6th, we keep hearing this, that, you have to give the board and all, and especially the children who really put in, for them, it is definitely a backstep. But then if you see parents and all the children, we all understand now, even the educators, there was no option. And I think this is the best thing what we have done, because we cannot delay it further. I mean, if you see, we are already hearing about the third wave now. And the government, if you see there in Haryana especially, they've already allowed us to open the schools, from this Friday, the next week. But I don't see parents sending in the children, even now. And when you talk about assessments online, see, we've not been able to develop a very good app, you say, because a lot of children, we understand when we are checking, if you see, there are two sets of papers, right? Objective and subjective. So objective is very easy. You fill the answers and as soon as the child does, But subjective, you are not aware. And a lot of children take advantage of internet connectivity and all, my camera is not working. Teachers are following, we are trying hard. But believe in me, it is a problem. And I think the government has also understood that immediately we will not be able to fix something, maybe over the time as it goes. Maybe something is developed, maybe you all develop something, because a lot of people keep meeting us and they keep asking us what next, like one of the companies I know, they came to us and they told us that there will be a 30-second fraction. If the child is away from the laptop for 30 seconds, we get to know that the child is cheating. But believe in me, the parents don't agree. Even if you show the parent that, this answer is directly copied from Google, the parents don't agree. So I think seeing the times, this was one of the best decisions, because they are looking into consideration the previous year's track record also of children. So yes, time was very important. So the decision I feel is well accepted.
Mr. Cooper, it seems like you wanted to add something to that. Do you have your opinions on this?
So I think safety first. So honestly, I mean, nothing is more important really. So it was impossible to conduct physical exam. It may be disappointing. It is definitely more disappointing for the meritorious students because they are the ones who then get put into the average bracket and, all of that. But really it's so unimportant in the long run in the life, what you get in your board exams and how many marks you get. I mean, if you ask me, I may remember the percentage, but I don't remember what marks I got in my 10th or 12th or whatever. So it's just so irrelevant. I wouldn't want to send my child to school if it is even remotely unsafe. So, yes, it's a very interesting opportunity for schools to rethink the entire assessment rubric. And I'm so glad because finally they're pushed to start. We really needed to rehash our assessment a long time ago. And then this is great. This is such a wonderful opportunity to relook and disrupt the whole assessment model. But to even remotely imagine calling kids to school for exams, I don't know. It's not something I would, it's just completely non-negotiable, safety.
For sure, definitely. Ms. Thapa, what are your thoughts on this?
I don't know much about the government decision in India. In Nepal, basically what the government had us do was in the 10th grade level, we had to look at the track record in the previous, I won't say years, but the previous examinations, and look at their attendance as well, the assignments that they're doing, so formative assessment, and give them mark based on that. So there was a certain grid given to us that we had to follow. With regards to our 11th and 12th graders, though, I was a bit surprised. Initially, for 11th graders, the government said that we were okay to have an internal examination and then, grade them accordingly. We conducted our internal examination and then all of a sudden we got a message, we got a notice from the government saying that they are going to conduct examination on their own. And I don't know how that is going to happen because we just got out of lockdown. It's only been a few days and I'm hearing, as now rumors, I would say that we are going to go into another lockdown because of the third wave. So I don't know how they're going to make this happen, but I just wish, as a society, we didn't value examination scores as much as we do right now. Ms. Goel, very rightfully mentioned earlier, in the long run, it really does not matter because it's not the score that you get that's going to decide how successful you're going to be in life. So I wish this pandemic would teach us that lesson that we should all learn with the way that we look at education. But this is, a fundamental change that's going to come in the way that we look at education, which I doubt is going to happen anytime soon. So until then, I think our government is just keep on trying to find a way to make it happen and just find substitutes for a while. I wish this wasn't a substitute, and I wish they could find a permanent solution to assessing student learning and understanding just through written examination. Thank you.
Yeah, and just a caveat there, I was thinking, so in the US, a lot of universities are doing test optional, right? And although, so I come from a test prep background, and we did some research in this regards, and we realized that a lot of universities, even though they are test optional, where they don't require students to do SAT and ACT, they still consider SATs and ACTs as a very basic benchmark, even if they are not requiring it. So do you think like test optional basically is like the hybrid model, right? Where some of you can take it if you want to, some of you don't have to take it. Do you think something like that could have been done where, students who really, worked on it and really wanted to give the exams, even finding ways to give it online, if nothing else? Like, do you think that should have been done while some students who don't want to give the exam will also have the option to do that? Like, do you think that was one of the options? Anyone?
I think giving that as an option as of now, where our society stands with the value that we have for education as a whole, I think it's going to be unfair for a good majority of students. Anybody, if they have the option to appear for tests and then appear for tests, The rest of the students who don't opt for that option are probably going to be looked down upon because of the current value system that we have in our society, the way that we look at test and examination.
Makes sense, definitely. All right, so I have another very interesting question, and this is for earlier educators. How can educators provide effective intervention in the early years so all students are on track by third grade? This was an anonymous question. Do any of you have any opinion on that? Yeah.
I'll take a shot at it. I think there's no magic bullet. I think if there were, any human being would want to use that to make sure that all students were on track. And I think that we just need to acknowledge all students learn differently. And that is where the value of a great educator comes from, particularly with younger students who can't articulate as well what their struggle is. I will do a plug and just say there are assessments that can help understand why a student is struggling, not just what they're struggling with. And if we can take those assessments earlier and more consistently for all students, it will enable us to pinpoint what specific students need and enable them to get that. And so I'll just sort of relate that to personalized learning, which I don't think personalized learning shouldn't be sort of, in an ideal world, of course, every student would have a tutor and one-on-one support when they needed it. That's not scalable. But we tend to have one curriculum in all schools, and then students who struggle then sort of get pulled out for support. We can teach in multiple ways, right? We could have a system in which you had 2 or 3 curriculum that were designed for how students learn best. And so that students not tracking based on knowledge, but based on how students learn. So some students will learn better with a visual curriculum. Some absolutely need, in the US, some students really need phonics and deep phonics. And then some students can go with, whole language, right? But offering both those options and not saying there's one, and when you fail, we give you something else. So that's, but I will say there is absolutely no silver bullet for making sure all students are at grade level by third grade. There's just nothing.
Yeah, definitely.
Great teachers, great education, great system, and rigorous support, but certainly no one-step solution.
Definitely. Although Mindprint, I think, does try to address that at certain level, right? With the cognitive assessments that students have, and what grade level does it have to? I'm just curious.
We start at second grade, and the idea is to just understand, if students are stronger in memory and reasoning, what type of reasoning, and whether there is a processing issue. And it's like anything else, the earlier you identify, and identify is not label, but just identify a challenge and address the challenge, the better off students will be.
Makes sense, yeah. So Fen is asking, are there any alternatives to score-based assessments? Because I feel it's totally irrelevant in deciding one's success in future. So I think it goes very well with Ms. Goel, the point that you were making. Is there anything else, any alternatives to what we had from score-based assessments? Yes.
Sorry.
Oh.
Saying something?
No, please go ahead. I was just raising my hands.
Okay. So I don't think we can completely do away with score-based assessment, and that's all right? Because, assessment has to be a combination of both summative and formative assessments. I think I like to take forward the point that Nancy is trying to make, which is we need to make our teachers data literate. Data literacy has to come in. So, if you were to go to a small school, in a far-flung village, the only data literacy that they have is, oh, this child has come to school or not. Only attendance is taken. How is that progression happening? How is it, or, what is the learning journey of that student? That's not really happening, which is why we're, testing all the children at the end of the year in a, on the same rubrics and same metrics, and not even making sure they've all gotten through that journey, in that sense. So assessments, and again, like the pandemic has given such wonderful opportunities to do assessments in different ways. I'll give you a very simple example. Initially, the school started doing MCQs, right? And they were forming even the MCQ questions in a very straightforward way. Okay, so name the character, name how many, something which was all about rote. And we did training with our teachers to create better MCQs, which would require thinking skills, even if it is an objective question. So that gives opportunities for students who may not be rote learners, but who actually have very high thinking skills to also be able to excel. So just kind of, again, relooking at assessments and thinking of new tools and training our teachers to use data literacy in classroom, understanding every child, their learning needs, and being creative will go a very long way. So yeah, I mean, scores are not important, but they are not going to go away entirely either. So just a combination of summative, formative.
Ms. Alpana, we can have Ms. Tapa say something. I think she had a point to add, and then we'll go to you. Ms. Tapa, you.
Yeah. One of the alternatives that has worked very well for our school, although that's not the only form of assessment that we can have in our school because of the government regulation again, because we have to have examinations, is task-based assessment. So whatever it is that they learn, they have to be able to apply it in their real life, and we create a setting where they may be able to apply the skills and the knowledge that they've learned in their real life setting. Sometimes it's direct application, other times it's more reflection of they've learned. For instance, just recently, I think it's barely been 3 days, we're going through a round of summative assessments for our units right now in our school. And so just to give you an example, for PE class, this, I think it's 7th grade or 6th grader, they were learning about, mental health and body image and how the media affects the way that we see ourselves and the way it affects our mental health and what beauty is. And there was this one child who never turned on his video the entire unit. Okay, maybe he barely spoke here and there, but he never turned on his video. And when it was time to do the task-based summative assessment, he made this wonderful content. It was about a 1.5 minute long video of of going through this life of seeing himself, measuring his belly, measuring himself, and and having his chat with his friend, a very natural chat with his friend. I'm just trying to walk you through his video, and how he would keep having on his vision board, okay, lose more weight, eat less, and it was made in such a beautiful way that content towards the end of the unit, I was in tears. And, that to me tells that he understands the concept. He understands, the concept that the teacher was trying to teach in that unit and was trying to explore, that everybody explored, which we weren't sure because he had his video off the whole time. But that task, that video that he made spoke volumes about what he understood about that concept. And I don't need a 3-hour-long examination to prove to me that he understands, what that concept is and whether he understands the concept or not. So I think, again, we are forced by the government to conduct some sort of written examination at the end, but I wish we could just do away with this. But there are alternatives that we can have this in school, and maybe this could also be a good answer to those parents when they say, my child does not know anything, does not understand anything. Give a task in the language that the child speaks and is comfortable with and would like to express how he or she has learned. And, meanwhile, on the side, we can teach test-taking skills. It's a skill that can be learned and that can be taught on the side. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tapa. Ms. Bhaveja, you were going to add something?
Yeah, so as Ms. Thapa rightly pointed out, so now you see there are 2 kinds of assessments, right? One is assessment for learning and one is assessment of learning. I'm sure all the educators understand that. So while on the ongoing, like in our school till grade 5, we don't have formal assessments for these children. They are ongoing assessments catering to all the multiple sections of children, right? So we have group activities, we have individual activities, we have peer activities where certain children who don't open up also open up, as rightly pointed out Ms. Thapa, that certain children, they don't know the concept, but they don't know how to comprehend it. All right. And the main aim of education is that they should understand the concept. Again, we talk about differential education here. See, assessments are important because somewhere checkpoints, you need to see that every age group, there is a curriculum which is laid down, if the children have reached to that level or not. And then like most of the schools, we are also doing, we plan bridging the gap classes, right? So definitely there has to be some checkpoint to see what learning actually happened and where is that the child needs assistance. Now, if you see the pattern of the question paper, as Ms. Goyal said, can be changed, and a lot of boards are also working towards it, even CBSE for that matter. And now they have certain questions, say in a paper, 50% of questions may be answered by every child, that level. And then differentiation comes, maybe 20% may be answered by the another set of children. And then the 30%, logical reasoning. So this is where that assessment is important, but what type of assessment we need to train our trainers, rightly pointed out, and we need to actually have a lot of trainings for assessment, which is very, very essential because all these skills, all these skills should be tested by these assessments, which is very, very important.
Makes sense. So it's not just about grades of the students, but also grades of the educators as well. Some points for them as well, for sure. So we will have time for maybe a couple more questions. So one of the questions asked by an anonymous attendee was, what are the most common challenges faced by educators with respect to parents? And I want to direct this question to Mr. Kapoor and Mr. Rooj. From an EdTech point of view, what do you guys think are the biggest challenges faced from your end, from the parents?
I think there is a very humorous answer to this, because talking to parents, and when we speak to them, we do our researches. The kid is not paying attention.
Yeah.
There is a lot of screen time. He's not understanding the concepts. So simple answers are there. But whatever solutions you give to a parent, they have to involve themselves. We have built across solutions on adaptive learning, artificial intelligence, wherein a lot of challenges would be taken care. We talk about assessment. So even the questions would be set randomly. So how kids cheat, we should ask ourselves. They ask from their peers. They call them because parents are not allowing them. 99% parents won't allow them. So if questions are set in a different manner and random answers are there or random questions are there, so a lot of queries could be addressed. And obviously artificial intelligence and adaptive learning coming in, I'm actually, a lot of gaps could be addressed. It's not a 100% solution, but a lot of gaps could be addressed.
Makes sense. Mr. Rooj?
So, Karthik, Sahil explained it very well. But then, as all of us are aware that this entire shift to online actually brought classrooms inside homes. Parents all this while never knew what happens inside a classroom. What does the teacher do? How was the teaching? In one of the schools I was dealing with in a state called Patna here. I'm just telling because they're international speakers as well. There's a state in India called Patna, and there's a school there. And the student was in an English class. The teacher was teaching in Hindi, right? He teaches English and Hindi. That's the way it happens. Parents were shocked to see all of this stuff. So parents have started demanding accountability now, because a lot of things have become exposed, and different service providers, different schools have responded differently. Somebody pointed out towards the window and somebody started looking at the mirror, right? You started looking at the window, you start explaining the world and all the reasons why this thing is happening. When you look at the mirror, you figure out that if the kid has not learned, the teacher has not taught. So I think schools and institutions are also making amendments. EdTech companies are making amendments to start making sure that become accountable to stuff. All of these things are becoming exposed these days.
Definitely makes sense. Makes complete sense. Thank you, Mr. Rooj, for that. Does anyone else want to add to that, to this particular question regarding challenges faced with respect to parents?
I think to some extent, parents, again, different people view the same thing and then, have completely different understanding, despite looking at the same thing, right? A good majority of parents, I think, have started appreciating teachers for the kind of hard work that they do. And they've also appreciated how teaching and learning has changed over time, especially in our school. Like, we were the first IBPYP World School in Nepal. We were the first IBMYP World School in Nepal. We are still the only IBMYP World School in Nepal. And the kind of teaching and learning that takes place in our school is very different from what parents see in other schools, let alone what they were used to, as a student themselves. And initially we had, there were a lot of shocking comments from the parents, but I would say, for the vast majority, they've learned to value and see how education has changed over time and respect that as well. Then having said that, there's a small percent of parents who are perhaps not happy with what they're seeing now, because earlier all they would have a child who'd come back home very happy and share about their learnings, and they'd come to school once in a while and see their projects and be very happy, get exam results and everything and be happy. And now that they're seeing that teaching and learning is very different in the classroom, some of them are very scared as well. Because their value and their experience of what a good education looks like is very different from what we're doing in our classrooms. I had this one parent last year when the pandemic first hit us, who was very upset that we didn't go chapter by chapter, because we're not a school who goes chapter by chapter. It was an opportunity for us to educate that parent, and that parent eventually understood, but then there are still so many who don't.
Yeah.
First introduced online school. It was very independent learning for the students. And because we're an inquiry-based school, children were already well acquainted with, independent study and independent learning and self-research and all that. And they would come back. We didn't have 24/7 Zoom because we didn't need to, because the children, they could just independently go and do their own thing and come back to the teacher, another time and then share their learning. But we had a huge cry from the parents because there were other schools who were only using Zoom the whole time from morning 8 o'clock to evening, 3 o'clock. And but that is teaching. That was teaching. And this is something that we've still not been able to address. In our hearts, we don't believe that the teacher has to stand and sit in front of the Zoom and lecture the child or just chat with the child the whole day, because we don't believe in that kind of education. And yet we have that pressure from the parents because they think teaching is not happening unless the teacher is sitting right in front of the child and talking to the child and interacting with the child 24/7. So, a lot of good things, but then there's still a lot of things that we still struggle with, and there's a long way to go.
Definitely. And I think a lot can be learned from this particular point as well, for all the teachers who are listening to us right now. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. So I'm going to end the panel discussion for now. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Does anyone have anything else to add before we wind up this particular session?
I think, Karthik, I would just like to show my gratitude to all the teachers who were fast-tracked into this online system. Because believe in me, I think everyone will accept that we, like someone pointed out also, that till we are pushed to something, we don't want to do it. So I think we were all fast-tracked to it. And I still remember those 2 weeks initially when we were, to get training to Teams and Zoom and everything. And, scheduling a class, scheduling a meeting. I think we were working till 12 at night. And so gratitude to each and every teacher who is, listening to this panel, and hats off to them, because we have really come up a long way.
Definitely hats off to all the teachers and all the educators who have had to adapt a lot during this pandemic. Thank you so much, Ms. Bhaveja. Anyone else want to add something? Yes, Mr. Kapoor.
Yeah. Just to add to what Alpana said, when all this circus happened, like the problem we are in unprecedented times, being in touch with a lot of schools, have 8-9 broadcast groups. So I started receiving texts from principals and directors, what to do now. And the first thing we did, we just started creating manuals for Zoom, Teams, and Google Meet. So we started sharing it. And even many of the schools and principals, they came back and said, please train our teachers on this. And it was, I completely buy the point. It's hats off to teachers, the kind of paradigm shift they have shown. It's just like Virender Sehwag coming and scoring a century in 50 balls. It's a phenomenal job done by teachers. Hats off to them.
Definitely. Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. And thank you so much all for this amazing discussion. I, for one, feel wiser now that than I was feeling 2 hours ago. I'm sure that all the educators in our audience today, especially the young edupreneurs who have also joined us today, had a lot to gain from this. And it was great having you all today. Thank you so much, and hope you have a great rest of the weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Karthik. Thank you, everybody, for the wonderful
Thank you,
insights.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye,
you.
everyone.
Right, so next we are going to be moving on to the workshops for today. I would kindly request all the attendees to stick to the phones because we are going to have some amazing sessions today with the workshops. So I'll let Jennifer introduce our first workshop host for today.
Workshop of the Saathi Global Education Network Ed-Conference for the evening. And I will be your facilitator in our live online workshops tonight. Our speaker for this session is Ms. Divya Jain, who will be conducting a workshop on social emotional support strategies with an emphasis on the assortment of assessments. At Patil International School in Burley. With 5 years of teaching experience and 2 years in curriculum development, Ms. Jain regional barriers through her detailed English workshops for students. Into the floor.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes, we can, and we can see you as well.
Yes. Good evening. I hope everyone is doing fine and is healthy and safe. So at the outset, I would just like to thank Saathi Global Education Network for organizing this wonderful conference and allowing me to be a part of it. Thank you so much for this opportunity. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and begin. I'll just go and share my screen with you all. I hope everybody is able to see my screen.
Yes, the screen is visible. Yeah.
All right, great. Okay, so the topic for today, I was just attending the panel discussion, and I think the parting thoughts on that panel discussion was about assessments. And it's a great link right now that I'm going to conduct this short workshop on assortment of assessments. So once again, hello everyone, I'm Divya Jain, and I am here because I love sharing my insights on education with like-minded people, and it's excellent to be among so many wonderful and great educators. So this is just a roadmap for today's session. We already done with the introduction. What I've done is I've divided assessments into 3 categories. So we're looking at pre-lesson assessments, ongoing assessment, which normally would happen during a lesson, something about post-lesson assessments, and then we come to the assortment of assessments, wherein I will take you through a number of assessments that I'm very sure most of us do day in and day out. And hopefully some of you will be able to pick up some new types of assessments as well. And before I could end making this presentation, there were some parting thoughts that I felt I should put it down. So without any further delay, let's go ahead. Now, when he used the term pre-lesson assessments, what I understand is it's also referred to as a diagnostic assessment. It's very simple. When we go to a doctor, we are not keeping well, the doctor will ask us for the symptoms and give us some kind of a diagnosis of what is actually wrong with us. And that's exactly the reason why we need to conduct these pre-lesson assessments. So let's have a look at why do we need to conduct them. So it is basically nothing but a tool to identify the needs of learners. When we walk into a classroom, and we are all aware that the needs of every learner is different. Learners are unique. So when I conduct a pre-lesson assessment, I am allowing myself as a teacher, as an educator, to understand what are the needs of my class. And when I am able to identify the needs, I will be able to create a differential lesson. Differential learning is a very different topic altogether, but I just thought I should bring it in for the fact that there needs to be a lot more emphasis when we make a plan according to the needs of learners. And that is one step closer to ensuring that most of our learners, and if possible, all our learners, have a great learning experience. When I conduct a pre-lesson assessment, I also set very clear expectations for learners about key topics. I am making them aware of what is to come. Also, it measures a learner's growth after having completed a summative assessment at a later stage. So by this, I mean when you start with a pre-lesson assessment, and when they finish a summative assessment after a lesson, or maybe at a later point of time, I am able to compare the journey, the learning experience that the learners have had over a period of time. And it allows me to understand how much the child has understood. Also, it provides an opportunity for the learners themselves to set education goals. I know in this time and age and in many places, we normally do not provide learners the opportunity to set educational goals. We set it for them and we ask them to follow through. But I still feel when I am making them aware of what is to come, they are pretty capable of setting their own educational goals. Another reason why we should conduct a pre-lesson assessment is it stimulates curiosity. As a learner, I am looking forward to a lesson. My teacher has motivated me to enjoy the lesson as well as to look forward to it. And finally, such assessments, they acknowledge that learners are not blank slates. This is a very nice statement that I had come across when I was trying to do a little more research on pre-lesson assessments, that no matter how new a particular topic is, we will be able to find some kind of information and judge that prior knowledge the learner has and link it to the topic that I'm going to teach. So, and therefore it makes it a little easier for the teachers to set the right kind of learning objectives for that particular lesson. So these are some of the very important and significant reasons why pre-lesson assessments need to be done. Now moving on to the next set of assessments, which I believe are the most conducted set of assessments, if I may say. That's the ongoing assessments. They are also referred to as formative assessments, and they happen during the lesson, sometimes knowingly and sometimes unknowingly as well. I came across these two great analogies when you talk about ongoing assessments, that is an assessment during a lesson. So let's imagine that there is a basketball coach who is working with his team during practice sessions. Now, when the coach starts working with the team, he looks at individual players, observes their performance, looks at the team together and observes their performance as well. When they come back, he gives them feedback. He asks his player to work on certain skills. He asks them to work a little bit probably on team building. He gives them a roadmap where to pass the ball, how to score as many hoops as possible. So the basketball coach is doing this continuously right from the start till the end, till the time they play that match. It's never ending. And in the same way, there is a director who is working with her troupe of actors for a stage production. All right. So Of course, a stage production will have actors who come from different backgrounds, have a different method of acting. So it's not possible that everything will happen at one go. The director needs to keep, once again, as I said, give feedback to individual actors, ask them to get into the role, into the character, give them some tips, let them know what feelings and emotions are expected, from the character. So in the same way, we are probably those basketball coaches or those directors who constantly need to give feedback after having observed the students' behavior so that they give their best performance whenever they are assessed and in any way possible. So when I am conducting an ongoing assessment, what exactly am I achieving? So an ongoing assessment is an integration of performance and feedback that will help to improve the next performance. So if the basketball coach does not observe their performance throughout practice sessions, if the director does not ask the actors to do a retake or give them those tips for their acting, the end product will probably not be the best. The team may not win the match, or the director may not be able to get the best performance and put up a wonderful stage production. And that's what is the integration of performance and feedback. Also, another very important thing which I have noticed, throughout my career, and have learned it the hard way actually, is that it's very important to establish criteria. I need to be very clear. My criteria have to be relevant to the topic or the lesson that I'm teaching, and it has to be public. Now, when I say public, I mean everyone in the class, my learners need to know what are the criteria. There is nothing to hide. If I am expecting my child, the student or the learner to get, say, 10 on 10 or a 20 on 20, if I don't set the criteria clearly, if the criteria is not relevant, and if they do not know the criteria, how can I, as an educator, expect my children to perform to the best of their ability? So it's extremely important that we set out criteria. In fact, I've read it in many places, and I have practiced this in my class as well. Sometimes you can allow students or learners to set their own criteria and then follow through with that. And trust me, the results are amazing. And once we've done that, it's also very important to provide feedback. I know we all teach so many students, we have so many classes, we teach different subjects, but providing feedback is essential and it's very, very important. And if it occurs frequently, it is even better. It can be planned or it can be unplanned, just like an assessment. Okay, an ongoing assessment is not necessarily a planned one. Even if I'm asking 3-4 quick questions in class to students and they are giving me responses, that's an ongoing assessment. So even the feedback on that is unplanned. And also give a lot of suggestions as to how they can improve through different methods of reflection. Reflection is very, very important. All right. If we allow students to reflect on what they have done, if they do that self-reflection, they will understand where they stand. Another form of reflection could be what their peers tell them. So if you can allow their peers to check on the work that they have done and give them constructive feedback, that exactly will help them reflect a little deeper. Just to give you an example, tomorrow we have a session on skill building, for grade 7 in school. And peer assessment is one skill, I would say, that we're trying to develop among students. We've just planned a few tasks for students to do in groups. Once the students finish their task, we are going to help them give feedback to their peers in the best possible way. We're going to give them some words, some statements, how to give constructive feedback and develop that skill in the students. And trust me, sometimes what a friend or a buddy says works a lot better than what a teacher says. And definitely, the teacher has to give feedback whenever possible. And it's really very, very important that the teacher gives timely feedback, does not delay feedback. If I've taken an assessment, I should ensure I give the feedback as soon as possible, because delayed feedback may not be as effective. Moving on. Then this is a question which I think is there always on all our minds, you know, isn't this kind of assessment time consuming? And me being a teacher for so long, I would have asked this question even today, because the answer is yes. Any kind of work that I'm assessing, okay, is time consuming. So if I am asking teachers to do a pre-assessment and then ongoing assessment, and then an assessment will definitely happen after a lesson, wouldn't it be time consuming? My take on this is that if I do not invest this time in taking the assessment and giving feedback to the students during a lesson, I wouldn't understand where my students stand in terms of learning, and I wouldn't know what are they missing. Also, without the feedback that I give them on these assessments, there'll be very little scope for improvement in their performance at a later stage. And that's what I said earlier, we are assessing them all the time. So it does not necessarily need to be a planned ongoing assessment. It can be anything that, you know, comes into our head at the spur of the moment, which helps us understand how much the child has learned. So yes, the overall thing, I can say it can be a little time consuming, but believe me, it is worth the efforts. All right, just moving on to the next one. Yeah, then we also have post-lesson assessments. Some of us may refer to them as formative assessments as yet, because if we are taking a short lesson and, you know, testing after that, then it can be a formative assessment, and we can also call them summative if we are taking a bigger chunk of the syllabus or the portion, etc., and testing them. So it can be either of the two. Now, why do we conduct post-lesson assessments? Okay, so when we do post-lesson assessment, now we are giving a chance, an opportunity for the learners to show their growth. How far have they come, you know, from the beginning of a particular lesson to having taken that pre-assessment and coming into an assessment after the lesson. So it's their opportunity to shine and show their growth. And one of the things about an assessment after a lesson is learners do so without any help from the teacher or their peers. We have instilled that confidence in our students to undertake this assessment without our help or the help of their peers. Another reason is very close to us, that is we get to evaluate our own teaching. It's very important for us when we look at the assessments, we grade them to, you know, have a good analysis done as to what particular question or what particular concept do most students do not know the answers to or have not answered in the right way. It allows us to go back to the drawing board, redo something, try and, you know, come back and explain the same thing to the students in a different way. Also, it enables me as a teacher to identify learners who probably need a little more scaffolding. As we know, different classes, different types of learners. Everyone is unique. So if I assess a child through a pre-assessment, ongoing and post-assessment, and I still feel that the child's performance needs more improvement, the child needs help, there is some concept, there is an idea, there is a mathematical operation, anything that the child is unable to understand, I need to provide that support. And that takes me back to the fact that I probably need to create a better differential learning lesson. So coming back to differential learning yet again. And finally, learners also demonstrate their understanding and their skills. So that is actually very important. You may, keep teaching, the students will learn, you do great activities with them, group activities, paired activities, etc. But students also feel the need to shine and to show what they have learned. And that in itself is a sense of achievement. So therefore, learners demonstrate their understanding and skills after you have done a unit or a lesson with them. So this is all about the assessing the learners before a unit, during a unit, and of course, after we have finished. Now, my next slide is just, I've spoken to a lot of teachers, got in touch with my colleagues, tried to gather as much as I could. And these are just some, assessment tools that I'm sure most of us use day in and day out to assess our learners. I have just categorized them into ways to pre-assess learners and assess them during a lesson and after a lesson. Of course, all of this is interchangeable. You can use any assessment method and put it in any particular category depending on how you are going to make use of it. So if I am, going to pre-assess learners, I'll probably use a common sense inventory. I can use quiz, a concept map, background knowledge probe, which works the best. A gallery walk, a minute paper, where they're just simply asked to write and pen down their thoughts about a particular idea that they already know about, and then try and link it to what I'm going to teach. Also, ways to assess learners during a lesson. You can have brainstorming sessions. Students create concept maps throughout the lesson for different ideas and concepts. Think, pair, share, allows them the opportunity to work with their peers. We can offer case studies. We can ask them to think aloud when they talk to their partners or they talk to each other in groups. Ask them to observe. There is Google Forms, there are discussions, there are pop quizzes. Again, a minute paper can be included. Surveys, social media messages. This is something very unique since we know we are all grappling with the online teaching learning, and we are nowhere close to entering a school and teaching and inviting our students to it back again. Social media messages, just asking them to tweet, writing a message to somebody on Instagram, creating Instagram reels. So many things we can do through social media. Sketch notes, allowing them to doodle, this appeals to different kinds of learners. Exit ticket, you can have a learning blog where each student has created their own blog and they pen down their reflections and they pen down the learning process and what all they have learned in that particular lesson. Then there is high and lows. So this is a very interesting thing wherein you sit with a group of students, and when you feel that they aren't showing as much interest as they would, so you can take them back to say a few classes and ask them to say what was the high point in the lesson that they have learned until now, and probably what was the low that they haven't understood or will need more help in. So high points and low when you're teaching a particular lesson. And ways to assess learners after a lesson. Again, you can have quiz, you can have them write reflective journals. We tend to lean a lot towards exam style questions so that they are used to writing the answers and the responses in the correct way. Case study again, peer assessments also. wherein I can ask students to assess their peers, to create a short, test, a short quiz. Of course, the teachers have to be in on this. They need to monitor the kind of work that they create so that it is appropriate in terms of the learning for the student. You can pose problems and ask them, tell me, how are you going to look at this problem? How are you going to solve it? Multiple choice questions, you can have polls, you can have portfolios which have maintained over a period of time, and definitely question and answers work anytime. So these are very common methods, and as I mentioned earlier, they are interchangeable and you can use them in every possible way and in any category. I just went a step ahead and I got some more information from my friends and fellow educators, a little something very subject specific assessments. All right, and it's in English, mathematics, sciences, and humanities. So when you look at subject specific, these are the different kinds of assessment that we can do. And once again, we are at liberty to categorize them, which one can we use as a pre-assessment, which can we do when we are in doing a lesson, and which we can do after. So in English, we can look at rubrics and criteria, which I think is very important to set way before so that the students are aware of what are the expectations. We can have oral presentations using Flipgrid. Flipgrid is a wonderful website, and students just love Flipgrid. They enjoy it a lot. You can have them perform a dramatic scene, a play, or a skit. And I've done this even in an online scenario. And believe me, it works wonders. Students can perform brilliantly even if they are on camera. I'm sorry. Interviews, charades, creative writing, portfolios, book reports, book reviews. You fill in the gaps. You get them to make posters, make flashcards, a little bit of dialogue writing, play Kahoot quizzes, use the Padlet platform, create mind maps. They can write and give speeches, organize debates, etc. These are some of the assessments. In mathematics, regular class tests, mental math, project-based assignments. I think project-based assignments can be used in any subject at any point of time. And in our school, we did last year do project-based assignments, and the results were amazing. Students were so enthused to do these projects, and they came up with wonderful outcomes. So it was a pleasure correcting those and grading and assessing those project-based assessments. Exam style questions, yes. Exam style questions, I would say, keeps coming in again and again, because I think it's more pertaining towards the higher grades. Because in the higher grades, when they sit for an IGCSE exam, or they sit for an ICSE, CBSE, or any other curriculum exam in grade 10, so we start asking our students to write similar to write answers to questions which are framed in a very similar way, so that they are confident by the time they reach grade 10. So this can happen at a later stage. We use Google Forms yet again. These are very specific to mathematics. These apps and websites, that's Desmos, GeoGebra, MathType, and Padlet again, it's common. Kami as well we use, Kahoot and quizzes, and Nearpod. So this is what math teachers can look into. When you come to the sciences, the most important is research questions. I cannot lay enough emphasis when my colleagues told me that research question is the best way to develop the scientific attitude, develop the interest and their scientific bent of mind. Application-based projects, I think I've seen a lot of teachers asking students to get into their houses, get whatever is there, and try to conduct different experiments, etc., so that their learning is clear, because students are not in a laboratory now, and I think their homes have become a laboratory. So I think that's the second best thing that can happen. So application-based projects, experiments, multiple choice questions, some drawings, which are very, very important. Graph paper method can be used, to assess. Rubik's Cube, I think, which quite a few of the children do have, to explain the concept of volume probably. And another thing is it's very important to keep their interest in sciences. So to develop links between sciences. So for example, if you have environmental management, you can link that with physics, or you can also link biology and physics. These are just some ideas. And then you have lab reports also. Unfortunately, that is not the case now, as I just mentioned. And finally, you have humanities. Humanities as well caters to research-based questions and projects, discussions, a lot of discussions in humanities where you're asking students to develop different perspectives, be it cultural, global, national, local, religious, anything. It's very, very important. Quiz, and one of the best things, the way you can ask students and assess their understanding is, if you have taught them history, which is something about the past, are they able to connect it to the present? And trust me, there will be a connection. So get the students to do that. Tell them, if this is what happened in the past, find a connection of something that happens even today. And it just gets them going. You can take surveys, polls, exit tickets, role plays, where students, don characters and don personas of the past and learn to empathize or take on a role and see what that person probably would have felt. Critical thinking assignments, very important. Reflective questions. I think critical thinking and reflective questions can be used in any subject. Essay writing is also possible in humanities. Speeches, you can introduce them to great orators, ask them to read those speeches and ask them to create one of their own and use it as an oral assessment. It works really well. You can organize debates. You can have conferences. You can have SWOT analysis. Now, when you look at conferences and SWOT analysis, you can look at, probably the higher grades as well, wherein they are allowed to speak in conferences. It develops a lot of their skills, and SWOT analysis gives them an understanding of what are their strengths, their weaknesses, and how can they work towards it. Heritage assessment, pick up any heritage, ask them, give them specific criteria, tell them to develop questions about it, do their research. Business plans, wherein students become entrepreneurs and, they bring about their business plans, they pitch it to their peers. You set up, judges, whether they will invest in it or not, a very imaginary thing, but works well. And finally, case studies as well. So these are a lot of subject-specific assessments which I could find, and I'm very sure that you all know a lot more. And as I said, I had some parting thoughts before, after I finished making the presentation. So I feel and I know that assessments are here to stay. Hence, we need to be deploying them at every stage of the teaching learning process. Because it ensures a holistic teaching learning experience for the learners. This assortment of assessments, which is pre, during, and post a lesson, gives them that complete package, which allows them to become successful and develop life skills in the long run. Include a cornucopia of assessments. Do not hesitate to have a different type of assessment. Break that monotony from just asking them to probably write question answers or fill in the gaps. Take different types of assessment, because I remember when we had assessment, we only used to think, oh my God, there's a test tomorrow. I have to study. I have to rote learn. I don't know how I'm going to do it. So we used to fear assessments. I think now though we've changed, education has changed so much that we need to introduce a variety of assessments so that students enjoy assessments rather than fear them. And whenever possible, this is a tip that I would like to give: plan assessments in collaboration with team members. We all are a part of a particular department, and we all are a part of a school, a team of teachers who are so good at what they do. If there are 2, 3, 4 teachers teaching one particular grade, please get together at the beginning of the year and try and make assessments together. trust me, 2 heads, 3 heads, 4 heads is much better than 1 head alone. And you will be surprised by the inputs you get from your fellow teachers, because that takes the assessment to the next level and ensures that there is uniformity and the students have the same learning experience throughout. I think that's about it. This is one quote which I really feel is absolutely relevant when we talk about being educators. So education is an ornament in prosperity and a refuge in adversity. No matter what is the situation, good or bad, you know, whether we are prosperous or we are in a difficult situation, education will always come to our rescue. And that's exactly what we want students to feel, that we are not educating you because you need to get 100% or 80% or 90%. We are not assessing you for that. We are assessing you, we are preparing you for the future, for those life skills, so that you can use your education in the best possible way whenever needed. So thank you, everyone. And it was wonderful presenting what I thought with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jane, for that incredibly relevant deep dive on versatile teaching practices that can be adopted by both teachers and students as we adjust to the new normal in our classrooms. I urge you all to stay on the same link as we will proceed to our second workshop for the evening. Our final speaker in our workshop series is Dr. Krishna Shivhare, who will be conducting a session on communicating with parents. Dr. Krishna is a principal of Blossom School in Nagpur. Her determination for academic and administrative excellence led her to devise the unique GPS system that guides her and her students and educators. With 9 years of experience as principal, she focuses on enhancing student activities and opportunities within and outside of the school framework. Dr. Krishna continues to add valuable contributions to the versatile Blossom School portfolio. I now invite Dr. Krishna to the floor.
Thanks a lot, Jennifer, for a warm welcome. Even the Karthik also. Good evening, all the facilitators, teachers available over here. Well said by Divya ma'am itself right now. Education is an ornament in prosper and a refugee in adversity. First of all, we are going to discuss about why it is important to communicate student issue with parents for effective communication. That is very important. Need of an hour, you can say simply. See, dear educators, facilitators who are witnessing today's session itself. Effective communication builds understanding, clear, and trust. And my dear educators, facilitators, and parents who is witnessing right now, need to understand and trust each other. It means facilitator need to trust parents and the parents need to trust facilitator teachers. You all will be better able to work together to support children's well-being and development for the overall development of the student itself. This is why effective communication is key to establishing and maintaining positive partnership with parents. It's very important. Simply, I will say for professional working with parents, a positive partnership means showing knowledge, clear, and experience to understand a child situation, and it can lead to developing plans together to support the child. See, parents are expert now on their own children. When you work in partnership with parents, you will get the best outcomes for children. It's include first listening to parents. Clear? What I believe, listening to parents is the foundation of effective communication. When you listen well, you get more information about children, my dear facilitator, my dear teachers, and their families, right? You also get the full benefit of parents in depth of knowledge of their children. So listening, it play a very vital role. And dear teachers, in this way, you show parents that you value their experiences, ideas, and opinions, and take their concern seriously. So listening, it play a very important role. Some ideas definitely I would like to share for listening well, what parents want to convey. Firstly, dear teachers, let parents know you are their board, class teacher, or respective subject teacher, right? And you are listening and interested by nodding yourself. Let parents finish what they are saying before you speak. Then summarize what parents have said and make sure that you have understood correctly. I'm repeating once again that you have understood correctly what exactly parents have said regarding their what. Let parents finish what they are saying before you as a facilitator, you as a class teacher of your students, then summarize what parents have said and make sure that you have understood correctly. That is most important, my dear teachers. Most importantly, check on the feelings as well as the content of what parents have said. For example, I'm just taking the example of any of the child, Raja or Raji, you can say simply. Am I right in saying that you felt when the other parents told to stop shouting? Listening intently to someone is one of the best way I, as facilitator, know to honor that person and forge a deep human connection. Clear? Use appropriate open-ended question, dear facilitator, to get more information if you need, dear teachers. Always remember, open-ended question give parents a chance to expand on what they are saying rather than just saying yes or no. The first, listening to parents is very important. Clear? Then what sort of things did Raja or Raji do when he was being naughty? Like this, you can start your conversation with while communicating with the parents for the overall development of the child. Remember, as a class teacher, as a subject teacher, as a counselor, you need to understand parents' perspective, even if you disagree sometime with what they are saying. Clear? Next, coming to after listening to parents, now speaking with parents. In what sense you have to speak with parents? Clear? Dear facilitator, dear teachers, in every interaction with parents, one of your goal is to strengthen your partnership, your teacher as well as parents partnership. You need to strengthen it. Clear? With them, you will achieve this goal if you consistently speak to parents in a clear, respectful and considerate way. Clear? Kindly make sure, dear teachers, that while speaking, you are finding and sharing the positive about a child, learning, behavior, and experiences by open and honestly. That is important. Behavior and experience, be open with that and with full honest. Give parents accurate information on what you observe as a class teacher, subject teacher of the parents' ward. Clear? Most importantly, think before you speak, especially when you are talking with parents about difficult or sensitive issues. I'm repeating, about difficult or sensitive issues. After speaking with parents, let parents make their own decision. It's their own decision. Got it? First, you need to listen to parents, then you need to speak with parents, and most importantly, speaking about different, difficult or sensitive issue, you need to speak with parents, then let parents make their own decision. You as a concerned subject or class teacher, you can suggest ideas, but it's up to parents. It's up to parents to decide what to do next in case of any sensitive issue. Clear? Use ordinary everyday language that parents can understand easily. Remember, parents are likely to find professional jargon clear, daunting, so it is best avoided. It must be best avoided. Then facilitator, you have listened to the parents, you speak regarding their ward. After speaking with parents, dealing with concern that parents raise. Clear? So dear educators, facilitators, when parents raise any concern with you, the basis of listening and speaking still apply, and sometimes it happens. Clear? If your respect and sensitivity are still key to effective communication, then in this situation, sometimes the best way to help is simply listening to parents. Listen to the parents. Clear? Parents might just need to feel that the concern have been heard by the respective class teacher or the subject teacher to whom he is conveying his or her problem. Clear? You don't always need to look for a solution straight away as a facilitator. At last, sometime if you might find that it's hard to talk about and resolve concern with parents, at that situation, my dear facilitator, you might even feel that you are not getting the respect. I'm repeating, you are not getting the respect that you are trying to show. In these situations, dear facilitator, dear teachers, it's okay. Ask a colleague or supervisor or parents relationship team, or you to refer that particular parents to your organization. Leave it. Feedback and complaint process, that's all. But remember, dear facilitator, fear is met and destroyed with courage. You are there for the development of their ward only. Again and again, when the struggle seems hopeless and all opportunity lost, the one with a little more courage and a little more efforts will have victory, dear facilitator. Now, coming up to the next section, in short, balancing expectation about a student. Very important. What is the expectation of a student, and how as a facilitator you are going to convey to the parents of your student. For this, if I will talk, these are all 21st century skill students, 21st century skill students already blessed with technocrat. Huh? Within one click itself, all the information, all the relevant information, they get it. We as a facilitator need to understand that how is 21st century student learning different from learning in the 20th or the 19th century, and what does it really looks like. We need to understand. You as a facilitator, you need to understand. Clear? As a facilitator, as a parents, we all need to understand that, and then after understanding, we have to plan as accordingly. My question is again, what will be the future of work and career of our 21st century skills student? Yes, what will be the future of work and career of our 21st century skills students? For this one particular story, it's reminding me a few years ago. It happens, truly it happens, 400 hiring executive, please listen it carefully, 400 hiring executives of major corporation were asked a very simple question, simple as well as significant question. Are student graduating from school really ready to work? The students, those who are graduating from school, really they are ready to work? Then executive collective answer was, dear facilitator, the answer was, the students are not really ready. They are not really ready to work. The student clearly showed that the study, all these studies clearly showed that students graduating from secondary schools, it means from foundation to preparatory, from preparatory to middle, and from middle to secondary schools, technical college and university are sorely looking in some basic skills and a large number of applied skills. Which are the applied skills? Like they are lacking in oral as well as written communication, critical thinking, 4CS, problem solving, collaboration, communication, professionalism, and work ethic, teamwork, I'm repeating, teamwork and collaboration, working in diverse team, applying technology, project management, leadership. All these skills, they are lacking. Oral and written communication, critical thinking, collaboration, problem solving, professionalism and work ethic, teamwork and collaboration, working in diverse situation, working with team, applying technology, project management. So dear facilitator, reports from around the world confirms that this 21st century skills gap is costing business a great deal of money. Some estimate that well over 200 billion at that time a year is spent only worldwide. It was spent in finding and hiring highly skilled talent and in bringing new employee to require skill level through costly training program. For a complete 1 year costly training program of about $200 billion it was there. As learning is earning, dear facilitator, improving a country literacy rate by a small amount can have huge positive economic impact. Can't you feel? My question is, dear facilitator, why is education. Education falling short in preparing students for 21st century work. The world of knowledge age work required a new mix of skills. Rote learning is not enough. Experiential based learning, competency based education, these are all important skills which the world of knowledge age work required a new mix of these skills that you all need to understand. Parents, teachers, school administrator, policy makers require a clear vision, clear crystal vision of what our children now need to learn to be successful. Listen, everyone who cares about education and our future need a new roadmap to help guide our exploration and journey to an approach to learning geared for our times. Dear facilitator, you all are dealing with young minds. Remember one thing you have to remember: to accomplish great thing, we must not only act, but also dream. Not only plan, but also believe that great work you as a facilitator are performed not only by strength, but perseverance. It matters a lot. Moving to the next segment, working together with parents to push the child to success to achieve goals. Dear facilitator, in this, as time allows me, in this section, first of all, we take a look at the importance of building team skills. Clear? As I can convey you, ki lack of team collaboration is also there from a foundational level itself. Clear? As a tricone, it means teacher, parents, for the overall development of the student itself, will achieve student development by mastering the art of being a team leader. Team player will help your parents not only for their child's success at school, but throughout their lives. Clear, right? So, dear facilitator, how you can help children to develop their essential skills? By collaboration, clear, with parents, no doubt. From a young age, children need to learn how to give and take, share, take turns, play to their strength. It's core school, you can say, social skills, values, right? Learning to work as part of team will help parents child to hone many social skills such as patience, empathy, communication, respect for others, compromise, and tolerance. It also helps them develop confidence in themselves and trust in others. People, these things parents need to understand, and you as a facilitator, you need to convey to the parents. Remember, the primary school years are packed with opportunities for children to develop those skills, and children who get to grips with teamwork from an early young age will act as a positive role model for other kids too. This need to understand by both ends, as a respective class teacher of your student and as well as parents for students development, right? Now, how as a facilitator, as a teacher, you will build a team to push
Dr. Shivari, I think your video, okay, now it's on.
Remember, should I continue? Okay, remember the time allows me. Remember the primary school years are packed with opportunity for children to develop those skills, and children who get to grips with teamwork from a young age will act as a positive role model for other kids too. This needs to understand by both ends. As a respective class teacher, subject teacher of your student, and as well as a parents for students development. Clear? Now, how as a facilitator teacher, you will build a team to push the child to achieve success? How you are going to push it? Remember, primary grade facilitator, the primary school years are an excellent time to cultivate the teamwork ethos child will draw on throughout their life. Clear? And many activities which can be inside and outside the classroom must be designed in such a way to help children get used to being team leaders, team players. This will include, dear viewers, facilitator, please note it down, like problem solving tasks, group reading, forest school, taking part in any outdoor activities such as building shelters, lighting fires, team sports such as football, hockey, rounders, netball, and relay races, debates, class assembly, school play, school forums. Simultaneously, as the parents of your ward, of their ward itself, it's their responsibility. It's not a facilitator responsibility. It's a responsibility of the parents too, to develop team building at home. Now, as school-home collaboration is going on, got it? There are mantle of ways to give your child opportunity to practice their teamwork skills at home. You as a facilitator need to convey to your parents, clear, like board games, party games, cooking, challenge siblings to work together to follow any of the recipe, helping sibling each other with homework, active outdoor play, team games that also play important role, and most importantly, building confidence play a vital role. The children who are shy and reserved might find it difficult to be a part of a team. So, dear facilitator, in this situation, both teachers and parents can help by showing that you believe in the child. You both have to help a child that you are showing that you believe in the child and will build their confidence. Clear? Even enrolling in an after school club will develop team spirit, encourage fair ground rules for being kind for are essential for teamwork. The parents and educators, those are the part of today workshop itself, will suggest that if your child is finding the teamwork side of school hard, just simply talk to their respective concerned subject or the class teacher. There are lots of strategies that can be used to help kids to become better at being part of team. Most importantly, I will say, try not to teach fears to your kids. Introduce your children to what possible extent. Lead by example. Lead by example, dear parents. The best way to influence your kids is to walk the talk. Dear facilitator, please convey this to your Parents, please convey it. The best way to influence your kids is to walk the talk, model the behavior parents wish to see. Don't preach the beauty of books and learning and then head into your family room to watch 3 hours of MTV. Remember those little young eyes, tiny tots eyes. Everything you do, he or she is watching. Clear? As a parents, it's your responsibility to develop their children, to inspire their kids. For this, I will suggest please forward this to your parents, dear facilitator, as well as the parents who are witnessing today workshop to your children, but as a developer of them itself. It is an actively important to develop their minds, hearts, and soul. That's the job of the parents itself. Expose them to great art, take them to interesting restaurant, introduce to their children to people who produce unique ideas, right? Dear parents, likewise, it is important to inspire your kids. It's both facilitator as well as the parents' responsibility to inspire their students and kids. Parents must teach their children how to view the world. Both parents and teacher facilitator show kids the way the world works. And tell me or please convey to your parents that if they will see the world as a place of limitation, so will those little people, tiny tots you are raising? Not at all. Try not to teach your fears to your kids. I'm repeating again. Try not to teach your fears to your kids. Introduce your children to what possible. Inspire them to be a great human being who will elevate the world in their special way. Before ending, final conclusion, as time didn't permit me, will sure want to add on, my dear facilitator, which you definitely convey your parents. Spend time with your kids. Spending time with your kids play a very vital, important role. As parents are the ultimate role model for children. Every word, movement, and action has an effect. No other person or outside force has a greater influence on a child than the parent. Thanks a lot. Karthik sir, I think the Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much for the facilitator, those who are witnessing.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Jennifer, I'll let you take over.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Krishna, for that untapped insight on the importance of the role of parents in facilitating a holistic learning experience for students. It was truly insightful. I now proceed to invite Mr. Karthik Sarda to conclude tonight's conference.
Thank you, Jennifer. Also, by the way, I definitely feel a lot more comfortable talking to parents after this insightful session. So once again, thank you so much, Dr. Shefare, for this. A big thanks to all the panelists and workshop hosts on both days, especially for joining us on the weekend. Big thanks to all the teachers, principals, and other school officials who helped us in making this a success. Lastly, special thanks to Lemon Ideas for helping us promote this event, as well as the Global Hues for their media coverage. Also, big thanks to Ms. Pooja Sidani. I think she had to leave because of some internet issues, but a big thanks to her for and Skills to Life for helping in hosting this event. And also Jennifer, to you for facilitating it. Also, this event would definitely not have been possible for, if not for the rest of the team at Saathi Global Education Network. I think everyone who is, everyone from the team who is looking at this, you guys did a great job. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Have a great week ahead. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.